Chapter 990. The muscles under his outer robe bulged, and this old Taoist instantly circulated his level 15 cultivation, releasing his mystic energy outward. It collided with a handful of snowflakes that Arbor darted toward him. After several slashes, the old Taoist's eyes widened in disbelief as he stared at his outer robe that had been cut open. Even his arms under his outer robe were actually sliced open by the snowflakes, and blood flowed down. He was actually injured by a mere level 12 mystic cultivator in a single exchange. Arbor didn't say a word. Her combat habit was that she absolutely wouldn't waste words with you once she started fighting. Her fingers moved slightly as she guided several talismans, and more than a dozen high-level attack talismans flew toward the old Taoist's face as if they didn't cost anything. At the same time, under Arbor's command, Qingluan turned around and flew toward that eagle-faced beast. She spat out an icy wind and snow rain at the eagle-faced beast's head. On the side, the little monk silently formed several Buddhist seals. At this time, Qingluan and Arbor couldn't care less about him. One flew toward the eagle-faced beast to attack. The other instantly left Qingluan's back, activated the defensive barrier, and rushed to the old Taoist with several large strides in the air. The old Taoist was simply flabbergasted. Didn't this damn lass run away just now? He thought she was scared, but what was going on with her turning around and charging here without any regard for her life? How could she know that Arbor didn't want him to see her put away the heart of the inheritance secret realm and cause unnecessary trouble? That was why she wanted to leave this place and return to the capital as soon as she came out. Moreover, she had promised Mo Lien to return to the capital within 3 days. Now that 3 days had passed, if she still didn't return, she would definitely be nagged by her family non-stop. She couldn't be bothered with this damn old Taoist, but in the end, she saw that the old Taoist was following behind her like a fly that she couldn't shake off. Her anger rose as well. What? Could it be that she was afraid of this damn old Taoist? Let's fight then. Let's see who would have the last laugh. She really hadn't been afraid of anyone after being reborn for so long. Did he really think that she couldn't kill him? 7 or 8 years ago, he dared to challenge a group of heroes by himself. How could he be afraid of a mere Taoist now? What a joke. What the little monk said was both right and wrong. The combined cultivation of the three of them was indeed inferior to the old Taoist and the eagle-faced beast. But could it be that this was all she could bring out? Other than her cultivation, she also had all kinds of divine weapons and spiritual treasures. Her actual combat ability really couldn't be judged by her cultivation level. Arbor had already jumped in front of the old Taoist priest. Suddenly, he turned a black ring on his hand. They were very close, and the old Taoist priest saw her movements clearly. For some reason, his eyelids twitched. Hee. Arbor let out an almost cold and flat laugh. He suddenly raised his hand and opened the Imperial Thunder Barrier, trapping the old Taoist and the eagle-faced beast. The man and the beast were suddenly enveloped in a translucent light shield, and their expressions were somewhat dumbfounded for a moment. Spirit weapon. The little monk cheered, and his cute voice hurriedly said, "Benefactress, since you have a spirit weapon in hand, why didn't you take it out earlier?" Master was too lazy to pay attention to him in the first place. Qingluan snorted and said, "It was he who insisted on coming to court death." The old Taoist priest and the eagle-faced beast, who were being bombarded by bolts of lightning in the Imperial Thunder Barrier, roared angrily. The old Taoist priest's eyes were extremely vicious. He glared at Arbor through the translucent barrier. "You think you've won?" Chapter 991. The defensive thunder barrier formed a small spiritual domain of its own, caging the old Taoist and the eagle-faced beast inside. Arbor had no intention of paying any attention to the old Taoist through the translucent defensive thunder barrier. After sending a strand of mystic energy inside, the defensive thunder barrier was filled with the violent power of lightning, and it directly struck the old Taoist and the eagle-faced beast with a series of crackling sounds. A hint of shock flashed through the old Taoist's vicious eyes. This spiritual weapon is so powerful, but where did it come from? He truly didn't know that this little girl had unwittingly grown to this extent in a few short years. If he had known, he would have directly killed her back then instead of allowing her to grow. Anger flashed through the old Taoist's eyes. It was his fault for being careless. A level 12 mystic cultivator with the ability of an advanced great talisman practitioner, with the divine beast Qingyuan, spiritual weapons, and magic treasures, and even possibly comprehended the wood spirit's origin. Was this possible? Although it was very surprising that she successfully triggered her mystic meridians at the age of 7. What future could she have in a small place like the Lower Star Domain and in a lousy village like Kwoto Village that lacked mystic energy? It would already be pretty good if she could become a level 4 or level 5 mystic cultivator at most 10 years later, okay? But in these 7 to 8 years, the damn girl actually grew to become a level 12 mystic cultivator. It had to be said that he was completely surprised. What exactly was the reason? She was merely an ordinary village girl. He wouldn't believe that she didn't have a great opportunity even if he was beaten to death. The old Taoist's face darkened. With a rub of his hands, spiritual energy permeated his chest, forming a partial armor that first protected his heart meridian. It was evident that the old Taoist was a spiritual cultivator, and partial spiritual energy armor was one of the hallmarks of a spiritual cultivator. However, the old Taoist's current cultivation was suppressed to that of a level 15 mystic cultivator, but it didn't mean that he couldn't use spiritual energy. Arbor felt that this old Taoist's body exuded a trace of wickedness and strangeness. Logically speaking, he was already a spiritual cultivator and had entered the spiritual realm, but he just happened to merge with the power of a demonic beast and become a demonic cultivator. Just like how Commandery Princess Hui and didn't hesitate to merge with the power of a demonic plant and ultimately turned her body into a withered cocoon, the old Taoist in front of him merged with a demonic beast and formed a beast claw on his chest. At this moment, he was using this beast claw to resist the lightning bolts that were bombarding him from all directions. This defensive thunder barrier actually required spiritual energy to activate, but unfortunately, Arbor just happened to be able to use profound energy to activate the defensive thunder barrier. Furthermore, she was now able to skillfully switch between the profound energy in her 3 branch meridians and the main meridians. It could be said that as long as she wasn't beaten up by thousands of people, her profound energy would basically never be interrupted. The profound energy that was channeled into the defensive thunder barrier soared, and the lightning inside the small spirit domain was released in a dense interweaving manner. Even with the body of a spirit master, the old Taoist found it difficult to bear the impact of such powerful lightning, let alone his eagle-faced Xian beast. After dozens of lightning bolts struck the eagle-faced beast's body, the pair of crippled wings in front of its chest were blasted into a bloody mess. The eagle-faced beast lay on the ground, gasping for breath. It covered its head with its other wing and lay there motionless. Just now, this ferocious beast had almost injured her Qingyuan. Now, it was blasted to the side by the powerful lightning released from the defensive thunder barrier. Arbor didn't have the slightest bit of sympathy. If they hadn't pursued her relentlessly and tried to kill her, she wouldn't have retaliated out of anger. Chapter 992. Let the mystical beast core in this eagle-faced beast benefit her pitiful little white squirrel. Arbor's eyes flickered, and a dim light flashed past. A suction mystic energy in her hand instantly sucked the eagle-faced mystical beast, who was caught off guard in the defensive thunder barrier, to her feet. Whoa! The eagle-faced beast roared angrily, and was about to raise its wings to slap over. The little monk, who had been silently forming Buddha's hand seals, quickly reached out his small palm, and a golden swastika character smashed directly on the eagle-faced beast's head. With a loud bang, the pitiful eagle-faced beast was pressed to the ground by this swastika character. Qingyuan flew up and hurriedly gave the eagle-faced beast 2 more stabs without any explanation. Leave its head. Arbor reminded in a slightly anxious manner. Qingyuan paused and carried the eagle-faced beast, which was on its last breath, over. Arbor was expressionless. The startled swan dagger in her hand flashed slightly, and directly cut open the eagle-faced beast's head, cutting out a red crystal core from within. This mystical beast core was redder and more outstanding than any crystal core she had seen before. It was like a ruby, emitting light in her hand. The deeper the color of the crystal core, the higher the level of the mystical beast. This crystal core was equivalent to 100 ordinary level 10 mystical beast cores. Arbor was in a slightly better mood, and directly stored this mystical beast core into her inner world. The old Taoist, who was still in the defensive thunder barrier, was furious. He could only watch as his mystical beast's brain was cut open and its crystal core was taken out. He couldn't break out of the defensive thunder barrier to react. His mystical beast was already completely dead. When a mystical beast died, it was bound to bite its master. This time, the old Taoist was injured. He was anxious, angry, and resentful. A mouthful of old blood instantly spurted out, and his face was as white as a sheet of gold paper. Ah! The old Taoist roared angrily. He didn't think that he would encounter such a disaster just because he personally took care of a little village girl. Did he underestimate the enemy, or did the enemy grow too strong? The demonic beast's claws on the old Taoist's chest desperately scratched the translucent barrier, trying to tear open the defensive thunder barrier to let it out. Unexpectedly, Arbor poured another burst of profound energy into the defensive thunder barrier. At this moment, she had already transferred the profound energy from the 3 branch meridians and directly poured it in. In an instant, the entire small spirit domain was filled with the light of thunder and lightning, leaving no room for anyone to fight back. The crisscrossing lightning in the domain formed the shape of a well and cut straight toward the old Taoist. It was really a cut. The old Taoist priest watched as a piece of bone and flesh on his shoulder was completely cut off by the lightning. He did not dare to be careless anymore. Using his spirit armor to protect his chest, he then filled his entire body with profound energy and let out an angry roar. His cyan Taoist robe fluttered by the waves of profound energy, forming a barrier that blocked the intertwining lightning that covered the sky and covered the earth in the miniature spirit domain. However, because of the profound beast's backlash, he had already been injured. At this moment, he had expended a large amount of profound energy to resist the lightning. He could resist it for a while, but he couldn't resist it forever. If this continued, he would definitely be annihilated by the lightning. Therefore, he was anxious and embarrassed. He tightened the movement of the sharp claws in front of his chest, fiercely scratching and smashing the defensive thunder shield. However, was a spirit artifact so easy to destroy? If it could be destroyed with just a few hits, then it wouldn't be called a spirit artifact. Cough, cough, cough. The old Taoist priest was in an extremely sorry state, and a mouthful of blood foam spurted out from his mouth. Chapter 993. Perhaps even he himself hadn't anticipated that he would be heavily injured by someone when he originally wanted to exterminate Arbor in this wilderness. Ah! The heavens didn't open their eyes. How could they treat him like this? Cough! The old Taoist spat out another mouthful of bloody foam, and his head turned black. He looked coldly at Arbor through the translucent defensive thunder barrier. Could it be that he had to use that secret technique today? Damn it! If he didn't handle it well, he would be obliterated by the heavenly Tao. Cough, cough, cough. The old Taoist flipped his left hand and took out a white jade bottle from his inner world. He poured out 2 or 3 pills and stuffed them into his mouth without even looking. Arbor's gaze abruptly landed on the white jade bottle in the old Taoist's hand. A sinister chill flitted across her originally tranquil little stoic face. When she looked at the old Taoist again, her placid eyes were suffused with an ice-cold ruthlessness from the depths of hell. At this time, the old Taoist had already been cut by the defensive thunder barrier to the point that there wasn't any flesh left unscathed. Apart from his chest, which was well protected, the rest of his limbs and body had been cut quite tragically by the lightning. His entire body was covered in wounds, his hair was disheveled, and his green Taoist robe was soaked red with blood. Arbor's fingers moved, and the translucent defensive thunder barrier was instantly undone by her. She moved again, and a long green vine appeared between her fingers, which she flung toward the old Taoist with a swish. This time, the old Taoist reckoned that even if he didn't die, he would lose half his life. How would he dare to take it head-on? He directly rolled on the ground and dodged this vine whip attack. Arbor's fingers moved slightly, and several dozen immobilization talismans directly split open in the air and stuck to the old Taoist. Now that the old Taoist was heavily injured, the immobilization talismans would definitely obstruct him if they landed on him. Even if they couldn't immobilize him, they could delay his movements for a moment. That would be enough. Priest Dayu destroyed several immobilization talismans in exasperation, only to feel his body uncontrollably pause twice. And just as he was flustered, 2 whips of vines were viciously whipped. His back was whipped by 2 vine whips at the same time, causing his entire body to tremble in pain. He grimaced in pain, and his eyebrows were knitted together. At this time, Arbor stepped down step by step from the air, a vine whip in each hand. He swung it very flexibly, attacking with both hands at the same time. The old Taoist priest looked at the little girl in front of him. His brows were tightly knitted together, and his pupils constricted. The wood spirit energy on the vine whip was so dense that even he couldn't tell what level of wood spirit origin it was. It should not be lower than the 6th level of the wood spirit. Thinking of this, the old Taoist's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He couldn't hesitate any longer. He lowered his head in silence. A few seconds later, he raised his head again. His eyes were covered with a layer of green light, and his aura changed instantly. "Be careful. He has advanced," the small monk shouted. Arbor secretly opened his spiritual eye and instantly saw that the profound energy in the thief's body was increasing rapidly. His entire profound veins instantly turned into red spirit veins, and then a wisp of fiery red spirit energy could be seen flowing happily inside. The basic red was naturally one of the 5 spirits, the fire spirit. As expected, a streak of fire swept out of the old Taoist priest's hand in the next instant, pouncing straight at the vine whip in Arbor's hand. Once the green vines were touched by the fire, they suddenly burst into flames and burned fiercely. Arbor snorted. At the same time that he threw the vine whip in his hand, he raised his hands slightly. Then, 7 to 8 green vines drilled out from all directions and shot towards the thief. Chapter 994. With a shout, the Taoist abruptly flung off his cumbersome, tattered green robe. His hands directly grabbed 2 balls of fire as he charged at Xiao Mu. Arbor didn't even look at him. She raised her hands again and dozens of green vines wrapped around the old Taoist's hands and feet. A small stream of water appeared in Arbor's hands and turned into a shimmering ice sword. She rushed forward and slashed the ice sword at the old Taoist. "Hee hee. Little ant, you dare to show off in front of this old man." The old Taoist shouted and the fire spirit in his hands expanded. It turned into 2 fire sparrows and flew toward Arbor's small body. The little monk flicked his finger and threw out 2 flames to block the fire sparrows. However, the flames were swallowed by the fire sparrows released by the old Taoist. The little monk's cute little face turned pale. Qing Luan hurriedly picked him up and put him to the side. "Don't move," she told him and turned into a big bird. She flapped her wings and flew toward her master. "Don't come over." Xiao Mu's eyelids twitched, and she had already leaped into the air. After a floating flash, her figure had already disappeared from her original spot. The fire sparrows pounced on empty air. They turned around aggressively and rushed toward the old Taoist. The old Taoist priest was shocked. He suddenly turned his head and a fist landed on his face with a bang. The little hand with the Vajra talisman attached to it made the old Taoist feel very good. The figure that retreated was swallowed by the fire sparrows. However, the fire sparrows were created by the old Taoist. At the critical moment, he dispersed the fire spirit energy and the fire sparrows disappeared. Priest Dayu wasn't injured by the fire sparrows, but he fell from the sky and landed heavily on the ground. At the same time, countless twisting vines darted over and quickly wrapped the Taoist into a cocoon. His face, his face, his face. His face hurt too much. This was a real slap to the face. Oh, no, it was a slap to the face. The small hand that had the Vajra talisman attached to it was stronger than any jade in the world. It was originally the weakest part of the body, the face. Being hammered by Arbor like this, the old Taoist would die of pain in minutes. At this moment, a green vine appeared in Arbor's hand again, and he whipped the old Taoist in the face. Ah! Priest Dayu's face was already caved in by Arbor's punch, and now, a bloody mark was left on his face by Arbor. From the tip of his left eye all the way to his right chin, an oblique whip mark appeared on his face. Dao Immortal Dayu had never suffered such humiliation in his life. At this moment, he covered his face and rolled back and forth on the ground. Ah! 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 The green vines tightly bound the Taoist priest. No matter how hard he struggled, he could not break free from the vines. A stream of water poured out from Arbor's hand. The moment the water condensed into ice, she moved like a flood dragon. An ice sword instantly plunged into the old Taoist priest's shoulder and rotated. The old Taoist priest suddenly cried out in alarm. This ice sword directly sliced off both of the old Taoist's shoulder blades. Xiao Mu expressionlessly walked up and stomped on Priest Dayu's chest. Arbor pressed down hard and said in a cold voice, "Don't waste your energy. You've basically used up all the spiritual energy in your body. Right now, you're weaker than a weakling." Chapter 995. Ah! The old Taoist let out a cry of pain, causing the beast claw to emerge from his chest. Arbor directly reached out and forcefully twisted that beast claw, using all her strength to tear it apart. Rip! A large piece of flesh was torn off from that beast claw. This ferocious energy made the little monk and Qing Wan, who were quietly following behind, both shiver all of a sudden. Ah! 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 This time, the old Taoist suffered twice as much. Not only did his face hurt, but even his chest hurt unbearably. His entire aura instantly withered, and he breathed heavily, his voice hoarse. Good, you stinky girl, you are indeed a ruthless character. Cough, cough, cough. Arbor's small face was expressionless, adhering to her usual style of never talking nonsense with a defeated opponent. She directly opened her spiritual eye and scanned the thieving Taoist's inner world. She guided her spiritual sense into the other party's inner world and plundered him without warning. Ah! The Taoist was completely stupefied. He only felt waves of stabbing pain in his conscious, his head swollen and dizzy, as if he was going to faint in the next second. Compared to the inner world of the Pei family's second madam before she plundered, this thieving Taoist was already a spiritual master, and his conscious naturally couldn't be compared to second Madame Pei's. Arbor could be considered to have spent a lot of effort. Her spiritual sense endlessly seeped in, and a faint trace of sweat also seeped out of her forehead. Suddenly, she flipped her palm. Crackling like rain, the door to the old Taoist's inner world was forcefully plundered open by her. The items in the inner world were all overturned, and all at once, they all poured out. Seeing this, the little monk couldn't help but shiver, and exchanged glances with Qing Luan at the side. So scary. Ah! The old Taoist's aura became more and more dispirited, and his entire person blankly rolled his eyes, lying on the ground dripping with stinky sweat. It was as if he was fished out of a river, as if there was a flood, and his entire body was soaked in blood and sweat. Arbor ignored the other items in his inner world. She didn't bother to look at those precious treasures or magnetite precious ores. Her gaze fell on a few of the white jade porcelain bottles. With a suction force, one of the porcelain bottles jumped into her palm. She held it in her hand, her gaze lightly caressing the white jade porcelain vase. His cold gaze landed on the old Taoist, and his voice was icy cold. "You're that wandering Taoist. You're the traveling Taoist who gave Wen Rowan the meridian pill." As soon as he finished speaking, the old Taoist shuddered. For a moment, he could not restrain his emotions. A look of surprise appeared in his old eyes, and it was all seen by Arbor. This was a tacit agreement. Why did you do this? Although Xiao Mu appeared unperturbed on the surface, her heart was actually in turmoil. Why? She repeated again, a trace of cold anger floating under her flat voice. Pa! A heavy slap landed on the Taoist's face from a distance. Xiao Mu raised her voice slightly and reprimanded coldly, "Are you deaf?" Cough, cough, cough. Priest Dayu sneered, and his body trembled on the ground. He swept a disdainful glance at Arbor. Do I have to answer just because you asked? Will you let me go if I answer? Dictum talismans. Arbor never liked to talk nonsense with people. She directly threw out 3 dictum talismans, and with a flick of her sleeve, there's one more. Don't wait for me. Chapter 996. The dictum talismans flew past like 3 streaks of light and landed on Daoist Dayu's body. A dictum talisman could make someone with a lower cultivation than her obediently speak the truth. Daoist Dayu's cultivation was above hers, but she had crippled him and nearly crushed his conscience. His current cultivation was already as miserable as a dog's, so the dictum talisman should be effective. However, seeing that his previous cultivation was already in the spiritual realm, she generously threw 3 dictum talismans at him. One of them should work, right? Nearly 3 minutes later, a faint light suddenly flashed between the old Daoist's brows. The talisman had taken effect. Arbor sighed in relief, but the vines she pulled out didn't relax in the slightest. She had always been a cautious person. Even though she seemed to have the upper hand right now, she definitely wouldn't let her guard down. Were you the one who gave the meridian pill to Wen Ruan? Yes, the old Daoist answered honestly with a slightly dazed gaze. When did you give it to her? When? 8 years ago. Why did you do that? Arbor tightly clenched her fists. Her heart was filled with rage. It was as if something was burning at the bottom of her heart, burning away all her intermittent thoughts, that she seemed to have smelled a hint of a terrifying conspiracy. Could it be that when Ruan was instructed by someone to deliberately get close to father in both her previous and current lives? Why? Why did you do that? It was you. You deliberately had Wen Ruan approach our Chao family? Arbor's breathing became slightly hurried. That's right. However, this old man was also entrusted by someone. Arbor's pupils contracted slightly. She took a step forward and forcefully grabbed the old Daoist's chest. Speak. Give me a clear explanation. Who entrusted you? Who? Who entrusted you? Who the hell are you? The thieving Daoist was a bit dazed, seemingly unable to accept so many questions all at once. Who the hell are you? Flames of fury ignited in Arbor's eyes. I am the deputy manager of Shantian Prefecture. A bolt from the blue. Could it be that the tragedy in her previous life wasn't a coincidence? Arbor's heart trembled, and he shuddered for no reason. Could it be that all her tragedies in her previous life, the tragedy of her family, were all controlled by someone else from afar? However, the trajectory of this life had been forcefully reversed by her. Because when Ruan had died many years ago, it was impossible for her to harm their family. As such, Daoist Dayu could not wait any longer and wanted to personally deal with her. But why? Their Chao family had been living in Quoto village dutifully all this while and hadn't offended anyone. Why did they scheme against them so viciously since 7 to 8 years ago? Who instigated him? Hurry up and tell me. Who sent you to deal with our Chao family? It was our Shantian Palace's palace master who sent me to the lower realm Starfield. No matter what method I use, I will definitely make your family's lives miserable. It would be best if your entire family was crippled. In other words, when she was 7 years old, Shantian Manor had already been eyeing their family. I originally thought that you were just a little village girl in a village. When Ruan received benefits from me, so she naturally obeyed my orders. With her scheming methods, a casual move from her could make your family live in an abyss of suffering from then on, the Daoist answered honestly. However, I didn't expect. The situation was completely out of his control. Chapter 997. To be precise, someone didn't wish for you to have a good life. As for those useless Chao clan members around you, they were just dealt with in passing. Priest Dayu continued to reveal the truth of the matter. I was only following orders. Dayu was also very regretful now. If he had not been so lazy back then and casually found a useless thing like when Rowan to deal with the Chow clan, the situation would not have reached this uncontrollable stage. Not only did Wen Rowan fail to cause trouble, but she also threw herself in and inexplicably became the zombie's food. From then on, the situation became uncontrollable. You unexpectedly joined the Holy Water sect and became the personal disciple of the First Peak's Peak Master. This is completely different from what our Mansion Master wants to achieve. The higher-ups felt that I was incompetent, so they sent Manager Lu to assist. Your joining the Holy Water sect was the first variable. Afterwards, Manager Lu sent our Shantian Prefecture disciples to Shizhou City to keep a close eye on your parents. Arbor's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. What's your relationship with Luigi? Dayu mechanically recited with an old-fashioned expression, Luigi is our prefecture's third manager. I used to be under his supervision, but we were considered equals in the lower star domain. Continue speaking. Priest Dayu continued, the batches of people we sent to Shizhou City to keep an eye on your parents were all secretly disposed of by someone. We later found out that it was His Highness the Crown Prince of Imo Kingdom who did it. As for you, you actually received the favor of Imo Kingdom's Crown Prince and even became the Crown Princess. This was the second variable. When this news reached the Prefecture Lord's ears, he was very displeased. You slaughtered the Holy Water sect because you didn't want me to have an easy time. Arbor unconsciously clenched his fists, almost unable to restrain his fury and trembling. Unexpectedly, Priest Dayu shook his head and replied in an old-fashioned tone, that's not it. Luigi accidentally discovered that your Holy Water sect had the existence of sacred water. Luigi wanted to seize the sacred water purely to satisfy his own selfish desires. It was absolutely impossible for him to hand over the sacred water he seized to the Prefecture Lord. He would even do his best to conceal this matter. Why would he do that? A trace of bewilderment appeared on Arbor's small face. So she was actually a marionette in someone else's hands in her previous life. If others wanted her to live a miserable life, she had to live a miserable life. If others wanted her to live a miserable life, she had to live a miserable life. At this moment, she suddenly realized that her previous life's trajectory was actually carefully planned for her by someone, but her heart was still very confused. Wouldn't that Shantian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord just directly kill her and be done with it? Why did he have to play such a clumsy game with her? I won't let you have it easy. Moreover, she simply couldn't remember where she had offended this Shantian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord to the point that he had started scheming against her 7 or 8 years ago. In his previous life, he simply did not have the strength to offend this high and mighty Shantian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord. In this life, her enmity with the Shantian Prefecture all originated from the destruction of the Holy Water sect during the Golden Hairpin era. In other words, before the age of 12, she had never interacted with Shantian Prefecture. She was completely unclear as to why the Shantian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord had such great enmity and hatred. When she was 7 years old, he already wanted to make her have an easy time. This kind of hatred was actually enough to cause this Shantian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord to be unwilling to let her off for 2 lifetimes. Chapter 998. Arbor took a deep breath and asked coldly, tell me clearly. Is it only your Shantian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord who doesn't want to let me live well? At this moment, the old Taoist showed signs of struggle. This was a sign that he was about to wake up. Arbor raised her finger and sent several dictum talismans flying onto him. However, it was too late. She didn't know if the old Taoist was experiencing terminal lucidity. In an instant, he woke up with a start. His blank expression abruptly turned sinister in the next second. Damned girl, what did you do to me? Priest Dayu only felt a tearing pain in his chest, making it impossible for him to take a deep breath. In addition, there wasn't a single piece of unharmed flesh on his body from the lightning, and his shoulder blade had been gouged out by that savage girl. The old Taoist knew very well that his current situation was very bad. With his current half-crippled body, he was absolutely no match for this savage brat. You'd better tell me clearly. Otherwise, I'll make you beg for death. I'll make you regret coming to this world. Arbor raised her finger slightly, and a pill appeared in her fingers. This was the latest poison concocted from the 6-yang poisonous flower. Its effect was better than the heat poison in the beautifying pill. After taking it, it could make one's skin blister as if it was scalded. She only needed to use some medicine to keep the old Taoist half alive, and he would experience the feeling of his wounds never healing, of rotting, breaking, and being whole again. Don't worry, she wouldn't let him die so easily. This feeling of dying but not dying, of lingering at death's door, she would let him experience it. The old Taoist's eyes narrowed slightly, and he called out stubbornly, "Didn't you use some tricks just now?" "I've said everything I should say, you." A slight ripple suddenly appeared in the air. Arbor was in the state of opening her spiritual eye. She could actually clearly see 17 or 18 transparent chains extending from the air. They uniformly swung around the old Taoist's limbs and body, tightly binding him. The old Taoist was probably stunned at this moment. He felt that his limbs couldn't move, and his entire body seemed to be bound by something. A flash of inspiration appeared in his mind. He immediately thought of something, and his expression changed in a flash. He looked at Xiao Mu in horror and harshly shouted at her, "Hurry, hurry! Help me! Help me! You're a great talisman master, so you must have some talisman that can undo the binding. Quick, hit me! Help me! Ah!" Arbor stared at him indifferently as if he was looking at an idiot. "Tell me clearly, who doesn't want me to live a good life? Is it really the Shantian Prefecture's prefecture lord?" How could the old Taoist have the time to answer her question at this time? He screamed like a ghost as he struggled against the invisible chains. He looked at Xiao Mu in panic and pleaded, help me first. Heavenly Tao, ah! He used a secret technique to forcefully break through the limits of the lower star field and rush into the realm of a level 3 spirit master. He had a sliver of hope that the Heavenly Tao would not find trouble with him. After all, his cultivation had been suppressed to the initial level of the spirit realm, so it wasn't very eye-catching. He didn't use a secret technique to directly raise his cultivation to the advanced level of the spirit realm and enter the realm of Great Spirit Master. How could raising his cultivation so stealthily attract the attention of the Heavenly Tao? Pain suppressed his entire body, and the majestic and heavy pressure of the Heavenly Tao firmly enveloped his body. I'll tell you the truth, why save me, save me. Chapter 999. Arbor saw that he was pressed to the ground by an invisible force, and he was wretchedly crawling on the ground with his 4 limbs. She couldn't help but sneer. "Forget it. I don't think you have anything else to tell me. As for what I want to ask, when I find your prefecture lord in the future, I'll naturally be able to ask him clearly, right? Did the Shantian prefecture lord have a natural enmity with her? Or was the prefecture lord instructed by someone else? Wouldn't it be better to ask the prefecture lord himself? Shantian prefecture, whether it was a personal grudge or a sect grudge, would have to face them in the future, right? Rather than interrogating someone who only knew a little, it was better to save the effort and watch the show. After figuring this out, Xiao Mu couldn't be bothered to spare Priest Dayu even half a glance. Let him live or die on his own. No, you can't just watch me die. How can you just watch me be destroyed by the Heavenly Tao's might? You despise the Heavenly Tao and suppress it for it. Who can help you? If you dare to do it, you have to dare to admit it. Isn't it better to just accept death? Arbor's cold voice slowly seeped into Priest Dayu's ears. He was clearly an old monster that had lived for such a long time. How could he not understand such a simple principle? Humans, no matter how strong they were, would always show a timid state in the face of death. Priest Dayu raised his eyes to look at Arbor's cold face. His entire body trembled, and he was paralyzed on the spot as if he had lost his parents. No one could defy the Heavenly Tao's might. He was formless, colorless, and soundless. He wasn't in any of the 5 forms, and no one could even recognize him with the naked eye. However, he was such a terrifying existence. At this moment, he was using a formless and enormous power to crush Priest Dayu into a pile of minced meat bit by bit. Noiselessly, it was also extremely fast. Under the tyrannical restriction of the heavenly Tao, Priest Dayu's entire person suddenly disappeared. From his body to his soul, he suddenly disappeared from the world. This was the heavenly Tao's might. It could destroy you in a matter of minutes without leaving a single bone behind. Arbor shook his head, speechless. Priest Dayu was probably the kind of person who wouldn't seek death if he didn't seek it. If it wasn't for him pursuing her relentlessly earlier, she wouldn't have turned around to counterattack, and she wouldn't have forced him to utilize a secret technique to advance his cultivation and infuriate the Heaven Tao. Serves you right. At this moment, Qiao Mu was actually rejoicing in her misfortune. There was a large pile of inner world items on the ground. The old Taoist had quite a lot of private goods. There were precious treasures, magnetite pills, and even some oddly shaped forging materials. Arbor was an honest child. He took all the inner world items left behind by the old Taoist without hesitation. After tidying everything up, she took the little monk's hand and jumped onto Blue Luan's back. Let's go back to the capital. Fortunately, he had plundered all the items in the old Taoist's inner world. Otherwise, if he had been destroyed by the heavenly Tao, the items in his inner world would have naturally been destroyed along with him. Arbor sat on Blue Luan and rushed towards the Mo Kingdom capital. Before he could fly out of the Hulun mountain range, he saw a blazing light from afar, enveloped by an ancient golden dragon, flying toward him at high speed. Presumably, the crown prince couldn't restrain himself after seeing that the 3-day agreement had passed and ran over to find her. Arbor urged Blue Luan to fly over quickly. When green and red converged in the sky, Arbor suddenly jumped up and pounced straight at Mo Lien on the dragon's back. Chapter 1000. Mo Lien reached out and firmly caught her small body that was pouncing over, his figure as immovable as a mountain. The man's light breath drifted over her face. Without waiting for her to speak, he lowered his head and bit her little mouth. Their lips and teeth rubbed against each other as he aggressively pressed down on her repeatedly. It was like he was rushing to be bitten. Arbor was dumbfounded. She instinctively reached out to press against his chest and tilted her little head back slightly. Mo Lien didn't let go of her waist. Instead, he leaned forward with the momentum, practically crushing this little one's waist. This action was actually quite difficult. Moreover, the two of them were in the air and could only hear the whistling of the wind. They didn't even have a protective shield. However, Mo Lien's figure was still standing steadily, not affected in the slightest. Arbor protested in a muffled voice. She used all her strength to finally separate from him and sealed his lips with her little hand. Mo Lien, listen to me. I'm listening. Mo Lien pulled down her little hand and looked at her deeply. Arbor was suddenly speechless. What do you think? Cough cough. Strange. After being interrupted by him just now, she didn't even know what she wanted to say to him. Why aren't you saying anything? Prince Mo reached out and caressed her little face. He looked so gentle, but Arbor inexplicably felt that the person in front of her was unhappy. Why was he unhappy? She had already said goodbye before leaving. Oh right, I left you a letter. Did you see it? Arbor suddenly reached out and hugged his waist. She buried her face in his chest and rubbed against him. This trip back to Hulun Mountain was actually to find Teacher's mystic realm of inheritance. This trip was quite successful. You've been quite busy these few days, so I thought that I could make a trip alone. Those few words count as a letter for me. Mo Lien raised his eyebrows and looked at her with a half-smile. Arbor rubbed his nose awkwardly. She had only written a letter to explain the situation. Besides, she didn't know how to write a long letter. Mo Lien held her chin and said, Jojo, you're really good at running away. If I didn't pay attention, I would have let you escape. Arbor blinked. I didn't run. Leaving those 2 or 3 words for me counts as a warning in advance. Mo Lien looked at her with a grin. The latter shrunk his head and subconsciously leaned back. The man in front of him looked dangerous. That's not just 2 or 3 words. That letter was clearly around 20 words in total, right? Xiao Mu muttered softly. Mo Lien remained silent. She lowered her head and looked at her. Let's go back to the Eastern Palace. When night fell, Qiao Zhongbang and his wife received a message from the Crown Prince. The Crown Princess had been found and would be staying the night in the Eastern Palace. At this moment, the little fellow was sitting in his arms. She grimaced as she held a brush and stared at the dozens of pieces of white paper spread out in front of her. Crown Prince Mo personally grasped her small hand that was holding the brush, teaching her stroke by stroke how to write the so-called leave a letter. First of all, she had to change the way she addressed him. She had to call him husband, or dearest husband, or Lien. She couldn't call him by his full name. Xiao Mu felt so bitter. This crown prince, didn't he have a lot of work to do? Why did he have the leisure to hold her and teach her a letter for half a day? Can you write now? The crown prince tilted his head and looked at the little one in his arms with a smile. Chapter 1001. Nodding, Xiao Mu quickly picked up her brush and wrote a voluminous and emotional letter to him. Crown Prince Mo carefully perused it for several minutes before folding the letter in satisfaction and putting it away close to his body. He lowered his head and smiled at her. His eyes were so gentle that they seemed to melt into spring water. Jojo. Arbor's little body trembled for no reason. Next time, will you just throw a letter to me and run away? Xiao Mu very honestly shook her head vigorously. I won't. I knew my Jojo was the most obedient. Mo Lien pinched her little face and carried her to the bed. I was just thinking that you've been very busy recently, so I didn't want to cause you any trouble. Arbor mumbled softly. Besides, I'm very familiar with Hulun Mountain. Jojo, you still don't understand my heart. Don't you understand? Prince Mo placed her on the bed and looked at her seriously. No matter how busy I am, your matters are more important than anything else. Arbor's eyes lit up and she reached out to hug him. I understand. Even if I have something to do in the future, I'll tell you personally, okay? Mo Lien lowered his head to look at her small face. He only felt that this little one looked very delicious under the dim yellow light. The light in his eyes deepened. Prince Mo sat on the bed and sighed. Although you've only been away for 4 days, I still miss you. When he thought about how the little fellow was going to enter the secret forest realm again, and the crucial point was that she still needed a month's time, Mo Lien's heart was filled with all sorts of unpleasant feelings. I miss you too, Arbor said casually. When Mo Lien heard this, a smile instantly blossomed on his handsome face. He pulled her into his embrace and said, I really missed you. You little heartless one, you were merely coaxing me in passing. Don't think that I don't know. Is there anything you want to tell me? Speaking of this, Xiao Mu was a bit pleased with herself as she recounted her gains from the secret inheritance realm to Mo Lien. When she talked about how she was chased by the old Daoist halfway, how she fought with the old Daoist, and how the old Daoist was destroyed by the heavenly Dao in the end, she was beaming with joy and gesticulating. Hence, Mo Lien kept gazing at her with a serene gaze. This child's eyes were practically glowing when he talked about fighting. Just how battle-hungry was he? Shuntian Prefecture and I will not rest until one of us is dead. Arbor felt as if he had swallowed a fly when he thought about how that Mannerhead had schemed against him in both of his lives. All right. He responded in a low voice. Reaching out, he hugged her and said softly, don't worry and fight boldly. No matter what, I will be by your side, accompanying you and protecting you. She turned to look at him, her eyes sparkling. Lien. What I said just now was not to coax you, Arbor suddenly said. Mo Lien was slightly startled, but after pondering for a moment, his pair of phoenix eyes blossomed with a resplendent light as he gazed at her tenderly. Lowering his head, he pressed his lips against hers, lightly planting a kiss on her soft, small mouth. With just a light touch, he felt his body going limp. He involuntarily drew in his arms and rubbed the little fellow's soft body. Just now, when the little thing said, "I miss you too," to him, it was said very seriously. It was not just to coax him. Chapter 1002. In a remote corner of Chonghua Palace. Ah, ah! Screams continuously rang out from a side room. Fortunately, this place was extremely remote. Usually, even birds would be too lazy to fly by here, so no matter how much Xingru screamed, no one would come to pay attention to her. Mammy Su worriedly looked at Xingru, who was rolling back and forth on the ground in unbearable pain. She wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes, her heart unable to bear it. "Mama, Mama, what's going on? My face, my... Ah!" Xingru threw herself in front of the dusty bronze mirror and saw her own rotting and swollen face. She lightly scratched with her fingernails, and a lot of dusty skin flakes fell from her face, as if her entire skin was about to split open. "Ah, Mama, Mama!" Zhengru shrieked, "Didn't Sir He say that my body would completely recover after eating that super resurrection pill? Why did it become like this now? Why did her condition start to relapse when night came? Her beauty no longer existed." Mammy Su secretly glanced at Zhengru with pity. "Xiao Ru, do you still remember Sir He's instructions?" I remember. He told me to think of a way to deal with the crown princess within 7 days. I know. It must be Sir He reminding me to deal with her as soon as possible, so he gave me a warning every day." Zhengru angrily threw the bronze mirror to the ground. But that slut actually left the capital on her own. Because of this, the queen must be dissatisfied in her heart. At first, the crown prince had planned to conceal it for her and only say that she was recuperating at home. It was she who found out that the wretched girl had already left the capital a few days ago and wasn't at the Marquis of Jiayuan's estate at all. 7 days. 4 out of 7 days had already passed, and there wasn't much time left. That damned brat. If she didn't come back, how was she supposed to deal with it? Mammy Su hesitated before saying, "Xiao Ru, I heard that the crown princess was brought back to the Eastern Palace by the crown prince this evening. Are you serious? Come back. It's good that you're back, it's good that you're back." Zhengru relaxed a little, but the itching pain on her face was unbearable. She hurriedly said to Mammy Su, "Go get some ice cubes for me to apply a cold compress." Her face was so itchy that she wanted to die. It was unbearable. Mammy Su's expression turned ugly. "Xiao Ru, you're no longer the consort Zheng from back then. It's already not bad to be able to transfer them out of the woodshed." Zhengru's expression was ferocious. "That's because they know that one day, I will regain the divine grace." Mammy Su sighed. "Everything has been arranged for tomorrow. You only have one chance, Xiao Ru. Seize it." The next morning, after breakfast, Arbor sat obediently in the main hall and waited for Prince Emo to return from morning court. The two of them boarded the carriage to return to the Marquis of Jiayuan's estate. Qiao Zhongbang and his wife had been waiting for them with open doors since early in the morning. Now that they saw that their daughter was safe and sound, they couldn't help but grumble about how risky the child was. As Wei Ziqin held Xiao Mu's small hand, she inadvertently looked down, and her gaze landed on the lustrous white ring between Xiao Mu's fair fingers. Her expression changed drastically, and her body trembled involuntarily. She held Arbor's hand and couldn't help but ask, "Jojo, where did you get this ring? Is it this?" Arbor didn't hide it and immediately said, "I inherited it from an elixir teacher." Time to end the nap. Chapter 1003. Teacher? Wei Ziqin stared blankly at her daughter, then excitedly held her little hand and asked, "Jojo, what do you mean? You've inherited the alchemy skills of that master?" Wei Ziqin's eyes lit up almost instantly as she looked at her daughter. Her expression was indescribably happy. Before Arbor could step through the door, her mother stopped her at the door and questioned her repeatedly. "Mother, what's wrong?" Every time she mentioned alchemy, her mother would get excited for no reason. Just like last time, when her mother accidentally found out that she was an alchemy master, her mother actually solemnly ran to tell her father about it. The couple really did open the ancestral hall to pay respects to their ancestors. It was too exaggerated. Wasn't it just becoming an alchemy master? Did her mother have to bring up something like an ancestor's spirit or something like that? On the side, Qiao Zhongbang shook his head in amusement. Let Xiaoma and our daughter come in first. Okay. Wei Ziqin held Arbor's hand and stepped over the threshold together. Mo Lian and Father Qiao found a place to sit down and chatted for a while. Wei Ziqin continued to nag her daughter. When she found out that her daughter had gone to that alchemy master's mystic realm of inheritance, Wei Ziqin's eyes flashed and she asked anxiously, that alchemy master, you saw him with your own eyes? Arbor felt that her mother was acting a little strange and couldn't help but ask curiously, Mother, do you know him? Wei Ziqin suddenly felt that her expression was a little exaggerated and hurriedly covered it up with a smile. She waved her hand and said, Silly child, I'm just an ordinary village woman. How could I know the alchemy master you're talking about? As she spoke, Wei Ziqin's gaze fell on her face, a faint smile on her face. Qiao Mu pouted her small mouth. Mom, you look so happy that I thought you found an old friend. Wei Ziqin smiled but didn't reply. Yet Qiao Mu continued to murmur to herself, Teacher passed away all alone in her secret inheritance realm. I'll have to bury her properly later. Wei Ziqin's eyes suddenly became watery. She quietly turned around and wiped her eyes with the handkerchief in her hand. Mom, what's wrong? Arbor leaned over to look at her. Mom, why are you crying? Where is Mother crying? Wei Ziqin forced out a smile and tugged at her daughter's small hand. Mother only feels that you and that alchemy grandmaster are extremely fated. I'm afraid that this is fate predestined by the heavens. Wei Ziqin's voice was slightly choked, and a wave of tears welled up in her eyes. She held it back and said, Mother just feels very happy. Mother. Arbor couldn't help but laugh. He reached out to hold her arm and said, Why does Mother cry when she's happy and sad? Stinky girl, you're even making fun of your mother. Wei Ziqin poked his daughter's head and then said seriously, Your master's burial is a big deal. Why don't you have your father help you with it? This is your master, so she has to be buried in a dignified manner. Arbor pursed his lips. Mother, I want to bury teacher beside the sect. It was on the slope of the peach blossom garden that her teacher was laid to rest. Wei Ziqin's eyes reddened slightly, and she wrapped her arms around her daughter's shoulders and said softly, That's good too. If your master knew in the afterlife, she would also feel gratified. To be buried next to the Holy Water sect's deceased masters. Arbor nodded and met Wei Ziqin's eyes with a smile. Chapter 1004. On the other side, when the father-in-law and son-in-law saw that the two women, one big and one small, were actually getting sentimental as they spoke, they promptly changed the topic. Qiao Qiao, you'll be preparing to depart for the Mystic Beast Forest secret realm in 4 days. You have to make ample preparations. It'll take 2 months for a round trip to that place. Arbor turned to glance at her father and nodded. In reality, there wasn't much to prepare. Arbor only wanted to draw more talismans before setting off in case of emergency. The 4 people were chatting idly when He Zi hurried in. He hastily saluted everyone and then said to Qiao Zhongbang, Husband. Sun Yang just came to report that. He Zi stole a glance at Wei Ziqin and Arbor before bracing himself and saying, She said that old madam is about to die and wants to see husband and madam before she passes away. Qiao Zhongbang abruptly stood up and then heaved a long sigh. Wei Ziqin then stood up and said, Husband, then let's make a trip over. Regardless of how old madam acted, as her son and daughter-in-law, going over to see her before she passed away could be considered fulfilling their filial duty. Arbor actually knew that her father had previously gone to beg the crown prince for his grace, allowing old madam to remain in the Mo kingdom capital. The rest of the Qiao clan, as well as Su Jiao's family of 3, had all been exiled to the northwestern desert. There was probably no possibility of them returning in this lifetime. Arbor also knew that her father had settled old Madam in a small residence on Hualing Street, but she didn't say anything. Because her father wanted to fulfill his filial duty for his mother, this was a matter of course. As a daughter, what could she say? Her father had been this simple, honest, and even somewhat stupidly filial person in both lifetimes. Perhaps this was precisely what Madame Nei Wei admired about him. Arbor already didn't want to comment on whether old Madame was good or bad. Arbor also didn't want to meddle in her affairs anymore. After sending his parents out, Arbor had nothing to do. When he turned around, Mo Lien grabbed his little hand. Not happy. Mo Lien's eyes moved, and he reached out and gently pinched her little face. You don't have any expression. When have you ever seen me with an extra expression? Arbor didn't want to pay any attention to him. He put his little paws behind his back and walked towards his Nanju garden. Yeah, Jojo smiles when he's happy. When she's unhappy, she'll pull a long face. Arbor, humph. Mo Lien chuckled. She held her little hand and walked with her on the path covered with soft leaves. I remember when you were young, you weren't cute at all. Not only is he expressionless all the time, he also doesn't say anything and makes me guess. It's a good thing this prince is smart. With just one look from you, I immediately understood. I understood it so well. Arbor turned her little head to glare at him. Then she said unhappily, I went to see old Madam. She quietly went to see her without alerting anyone. At that time, she knew that old Madam wouldn't live for long. She was just a normal person. Following third uncle's family, she didn't eat or sleep well for a long time. Her body's organs had deteriorated beyond recognition in a short period of time. Even after her father brought her to the residence on Hualing Street, no matter how much she nourished her body or how much she called a doctor, it was useless. Unless she was given a life-continuing pill, which could extend her life for at least 3 years. The life-continuing pill that her teacher made was a top-grade black-veined pill. Chapter 1005. This pill was meant for people who were about to die. It was not like the longevity pill, which was used to warm and nourish the body. The effects of the pill were mild and could be used slowly. This life-extending pill was like a needle that stimulated the heart meridian. It could immediately extend a person's life for 3 to 5 years, but that was all it could do. When the life extension period was over, even Daluo immortals could not save the old lady. Also, if she were to do it, she could carefully give the old lady acupuncture for a period of time and then use the longevity pill mixed with various other medicines to nurse her body back to health. It was not impossible to save the old lady. At least, it could definitely extend her life. But she wanted to. Isn't my heart especially ruthless? I'm a tiger and a wolf. I bite whoever I catch, am I not? Arbor lowered her head and hid the coldness in her eyes as she asked Mo Lien. Not ruthless. Mo Lien shook her head. Didn't you ask me if I believe in karma? I do. Mo Lien nodded without the slightest doubt. He held her small hand as he said softly, she treated you and your family like this before. Saving her shows that you're kind. Not saving her doesn't show that you're ruthless. The cycle of karma was all about retribution. If the old lady had not caused so much trouble in the past, she would not have ended up like this. She had even wiped out the filial piety of Qiao Zhongbang and his wife. Now, the two of them were willing to go to Hualing Street to see her one last time just to fulfill their wish. Even if you're a tiger and a wolf, you're the tiger and wolf cub that I like the most in the world. Mo Lien suddenly reached out and lifted the little one up. Arbor was caught off guard. She hurriedly wrapped her arms around his neck and glared at him with puffed cheeks. Put me down. Mo Lien shook his head and said seriously, I'm not putting you down. What do you want to eat tonight? I'll cook for you. Arbor snorted. Braised eel, braised catfish, vinegar fish slices, spiced mutton, braised sirloin, braised prawns with 3 delicacies and 8 treasures. Xiao Mu recited a long list of dishes, and Mo Lien nodded his head repeatedly. Afterwards, he couldn't resist asking, why are they all meat dishes? What is Kong Kong eating? Make him some vegetable soup. Go with a bowl of white rice. Mo Lien giggled. Suddenly, a voice of protest sounded, benefactress. My meal is too crude. Arbor's mood improved slightly. He reached out and punched Mo Lien. Put me down. No. Mo Lien carried her all the way to Nanju Garden. What soup are you drinking? On the other hand, Qiao Zhongbang and his wife arrived at a house on Hualing Street. Sun Yang came out to greet them. Madam, old madam wants to talk to you alone. Wei Ziqin nodded mildly and followed Sun Yang into a small room in the south. The old lady was lying on the bed. 2 pillows were under her head. When she saw Gu Nianji walk in, she perked up slightly. Where's Arbor? Where's that wretched girl Arbor? The old lady wailed. I'm about to die. How can she bear not to see me? Wei Ziqin held her breath and clenched her fists. Jojo is cultivating in seclusion. Old madam, if you have anything to say, please speak. Old Madam Fu coughed heavily a few times and pointed at Wei Ziqin. You, all of you, are very good. Things had already come to this, but the old lady still did not like them. Chapter 1006. Since that was the case, why did she say that she wanted to talk with her face to face? Wei Ziqin wanted to throw a tantrum and leave on the spot. However, considering the elderly lady's health, she probably wouldn't be able to say much more, so she forcefully swallowed her anger. She stepped forward and bowed to the old madam before saying indifferently, Old madam, just say what you want to say. This daughter-in-law still has many things to do at home. You. The elderly lady pointed at Wei Ziqin and said with a furious expression, do you really think I don't know? Arbor, she isn't my biological granddaughter at all. Wei Ziqin abruptly raised her head and stared wide-eyed at the thin elderly lady on the bed. You're such an unruly woman. I don't know what method you used to bewitch my son. My son originally had a great future. He was recognized by the main family at a young age and even entered the Daybreak sect. If he wasn't assassinated later on, he wouldn't have returned to the village and married a lowly woman like you. You're merely a servant girl who serves others. The elderly lady pounded the bed and angrily said, you even deceived our Zhongbang and cuckolded Zhongbang. I don't know where you got this bastard from. You shut up. Wei Ziqin shouted angrily. How could this small courtyard be soundproof? Everyone outside could hear her clearly. Fortunately, there was only one Sun Yang standing in this small courtyard. At this time, she had already retreated outside with a shocked expression. Qiao Zhongbang hastily pushed open the door and entered. Ziqin, what's wrong? Mother, what are you two doing? He hastily closed the door behind him and ran to his wife's side. Looking at the elderly lady's trembling body, he said with a long sigh, Mother, what are you saying? Ziqin has been filial to you for so many years. Don't tell me you still can't see clearly what kind of daughter-in-law she is. Your actions not only chilled Ziqin's heart, but also our son's heart. Zhongbang, you're the one who doesn't see clearly. The elderly lady pounded the bed and cried herself hoarse. For a bastard, you drove your own younger brother and nephew to a place like the northwestern desert. Do you still have a conscience? Mother. Zhongheng and his wife abused you until you're emaciated and on the verge of death, but you still think they're good. No matter what we husband and wife do, you think we're bad, isn't it? Qiao Zhongbang asked in a low voice. I don't care. Xiaolong is my grandson, I don't care what method you use, whether it's begging or kneeling, you have to get His Highness the Crown Prince to let our Xiaolong come back. The elderly lady to Zhongheng and Zhongheng to Zhongheng's to Zhongbang to Zhongbang to make her to Zonto Zhongheng. Moreover, how could Xiaomu, that bastard, be worthy of becoming the Crown Prince consort? Mother to mother to mother to mother to mother to ja. Mother. Son twos to mother. Wei Ziqing's face was also flushed red. Her eyes were filled with tears as she clenched her fists. You too. You unfilial son and daughter-in-law. The elderly lady spat out a mouthful of blood. She pointed at Xiao Zhongbang and cursed, "You muddle-headed worm. Your wife secretly gave birth to a daughter long ago behind your back. If you don't want people to know, then don't do it in the first place. Arbor isn't your biological daughter at all." "I know." Xiao Zhongbang's furious shout instantly silenced all of elderly Lady Qiao's words. The elderly lady's face was filled with disbelief, as if she couldn't understand his actions at all. Chapter 1007. Xiao Zhongbang clearly knew that this daughter wasn't his biological daughter, yet he still feigned ignorance. Was he an idiot? Had he been raising someone else's daughter all this time during such a difficult time? Ziqing was entrusted with an orphan's care. She told me this clearly before she married me in town, Xiao Zhongbang said with a sullen expression. Your son doesn't know when you found out, mother. Could it be because of this that you've always been hostile to them? Madame Qiao sighed in anger and collapsed on the bed. However, she seemed to feel much better after spitting out the congested blood in her chest. However, Xiao Zhongbang and his wife could clearly see the glimmer of light in Madame Qiao's eyes. Mother. You've really misunderstood Ziqing. She definitely didn't do anything out of line. She's a good woman. In your son's eyes, she's the best woman in the world. Wei Ziqing looked back at her husband with tears in her eyes. It's only in recent years that our lives have quietly improved. Before that, during the most difficult, tiring, and darkest days, your son was always accompanied by Ziqing. Mother, it's because I rejected the marriage you arranged for your son and brought Ziqing and her mother back to the village. All these years, you've always felt uncomfortable in your heart, haven't you? Xiao Zhongbang looked at Madame Qiao as he spoke. Unfilial son. Madame Qiao collapsed on the bed angrily, but she hammered the bed with her arms. Fine. This old one was meddling in other people's business. If you like to raise someone else's daughter, then so be it. But, Xiaolong, you must bring her back. You raised Arbor for so many years for nothing, and all you did was ask her to do a trifling matter. It's nothing. Wei Ziqing sneered. Madam, don't worry. Xiao Zhongheng's family of 3. Don't even think about coming back in this lifetime. A cold light shot out of Wei Ziqing's eyes as she coldly shouted, Your grandson, Qiao Long, is destined to die in the northwest desert. His body will be buried in the wilderness, dried up and shattered by the wind, and not even his bones will remain. After saying that, he turned around and left, not looking at the old lady again. Ah! The old madam pounded the bed angrily. Her eyes rolled and her lips trembled as she shouted, Wei Ziqing, come back here. Wei Ziqing. I want to see Arbor. I want to tell her. She's not a member of the Qiao family. What right does she have to send my grandson to the northwest desert? She was just an adopted daughter. What right did she have to let the Qiao family's direct descendant wander outside? How could a little bastard like her be so capable? Ah! Xiao Zhongbang's eyes were red. He clenched his fists and roared, Shut up. Can you stop messing around? Arbor is my daughter. Don't call him a little bastard. You. Unfilial son, you unfilial son. The old madam couldn't catch her breath. She opened her mouth and let out a shrill cry. Her old eyes stared fixedly at the curtains on the bed. Gradually, her voice quieted down, and her breathing also stopped. Xiao Zhongbang walked out of the door dejectedly. Suddenly, he seemed to have lost all his strength. He hugged his wife and the two of them burst into tears. Ziqing, your husband has really failed as a person in this life. I didn't expect that my mother would still criticize me and call me an unfilial son on her deathbed. Husband. Wei Ziqin shook her head and placed it in his embrace. She cried as she said, "It's okay, it's okay. It'll all pass. It's okay." Qiao Zhongbang glanced at the side room with disappointment. He softly said to the servants outside the courtyard, "Start the funeral." Chapter 1008. Father and second uncle had personally taken care of the matriarch's cremation and funeral. Arbor didn't pay much attention to it, and Xiao Zhongbang and his wife had also ordered that the matter of what had happened in the courtyard on Hualing Street that day be sealed. Thus, Arbor didn't know that the matriarch had caused a ruckus before she passed away. She was only following etiquette and fulfilling the filial piety of an eldest granddaughter for outsiders to see. To put it bluntly, the matriarch's funeral wasn't that big of a deal. Everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. Arbor had been drawing talismans for the past few days when she was free. Today was the day of the matriarch's funeral. Arbor and his siblings, along with their parents and second uncle, had been busy until now. They had just eaten a small meal when someone hurriedly came to report that someone from the palace had come. Arbor didn't even lift her eyelids. She still leaned against the small couch and rested with her eyes closed. "I'm tired." "Go and reply to her. Just say that I'm in mourning for my grandmother's death. I'm afraid that I'll disturb the nobles if I enter the palace and bring bad luck to them." "Yes." Xiao Yao immediately curtsied and then hurried out. The green mammy, who was by the queen's side, was standing outside the door. She had a slightly arrogant expression on her face as she slightly raised her head. "What did the crown princess say?" Xiao Yao repeated Arbor's words in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. The green mammy snorted. "That's true. Then this old one will go back and report." Xiao Yao suddenly grabbed the green mammy's wrist. She stretched out her leg and kicked the old matriarch, causing her to fall face first into the mud beside the flower pot. "It seems that you haven't bowed to my master yet." Xiao Yao crossed her arms and glanced coldly at the green mammy from the corner of her eyes. "Kowtow 3 times before you leave. So that people won't casually say that the people by Her Majesty the Queen's side are unruly. They don't even know the slightest bit of etiquette when they see the crown princess. It would be a disgrace to Her Highness's name." The green mammy's old face was ashen. She gritted her teeth and knelt down in a huff. She unwillingly kowtowed 3 times to the tightly shut door. The humiliation in her heart spread. There was no need to mention how angry she was. She thought about how she would scold the crown princess in front of the empress when she got back. Xiao Yao approached the old woman, frowned and sneered, "Be careful. The sword in my hand doesn't have eyes. Be careful not to slit your throat." Green Mammy was so scared that she couldn't help but take a step back. "If I find out that you dare to talk nonsense in front of the queen, I won't just make you kowtow and apologize next time." Xiao Yao pulled out the shiny flexible sword from her waist and directly brandished it in front of the green mammy to intimidate her. The green mammy hurriedly shrank back and smiled apologetically, "Of course not. Miss Xiao Yao, you really know how to joke. Whether I'm joking or not, you know clearly in your heart. My master isn't someone that an old hag like you who likes to cause trouble can afford to offend." Xiao Yao kicked her butt. The old woman opened her mouth to exhale, but she felt a pain in her mouth. A pill slid down her throat. "Ah, ugh, cough, cough." The old woman's face turned green with anger. She covered her throat with both hands and turned back to ask in horror, What did you make me eat?" Xiao Yao chuckled and opened her mouth, "Poison. Don't worry. As long as you behave, this poison won't act up for the rest of your life." Xiao Yao sent the old woman out with a smile and then returned to Arbor's side. Chapter 1009. You've sent her away. Arbor didn't even raise his head as he flipped through a page of the book. Amen. She's gone. Xiao Yao giggled. This old woman was scared out of her wits by the poison that Miss bestowed upon her. I'm afraid that she won't dare to say anything when she returns this time. She's always staring at me with that disgusted and disdainful gaze. Did she think that I couldn't see it? Arbor reached out to take the medicine bottle that Xiaoyao handed over and expressionlessly said, "If she's still disobedient, then I'll let her slowly go blind. In any case, her eyes aren't that useful to her." Xiaoyao pursed her lips and chuckled. "That's right." Arbor didn't say anything else and leaned against the couch to continue flipping through the handwritten medical records that Long Chuyun had left behind. Long Chuyun had traveled to many places before. Not only was she skilled in pill refinement, she was also proficient in toxicology. She had learned a lot from reading her handwritten medical records and had benefited a lot. In the evening, Prince Emo came over. The moment he walked into Arbor's Nanju Garden's small courtyard, he huffed angrily as he lifted his robes and sat down beside her couch. "Lord Father is simply too much. To be able to make you this angry, it must be your old man who's muddle-headed again." Arbor put down a handwritten poison manual and glanced at Prince Emo before handing him a small teacup. "Speak." Prince Emo took it, his eyes full of anger. That muddle-headed old man. He was casually fooled by someone and his heart softened again. Arbor straightened up and looked at him curiously. Could it be Young-hee? She was released from the cold palace again. The Great King definitely loved Young-hee. With how much the Great King had doted on Young-hee over the years, if the Crown Prince told her that the Great King had released Young-hee again, she wouldn't be too surprised. Not really. Mo Lien held Arbor's little hand and squeezed it gently, but it's not far off. It turned out that for some unknown reason, the Great King had coincidentally passed by the back door of Chonghua Palace and happened to see Young-hee dressed in plain white sitting under a withered old tree. She held a brush and was scribbling something with a pious expression. It was said that the Great King was mesmerized by the scene. Young-hee was mesmerized by it. She wanted to show off her filial piety. Young-hee's gentle and beautiful white figure entered the Great King's heart again. The Great King quietly got out of the carriage and went over to take a peek. It turned out that Young-hee was using her heart's blood to copy a copy of the Ksitigarbha Sutra, secretly praying for the country, the Empress Dowager, and the Great King. The Great King quietly asked Mammy Su about it. It turned out that Young-hee had been copying sutras and praying for blessings under the tree day and night for 3 full days and nights. She was so devoted that she even forgot to eat or sleep. Mammy Su even wiped her tears and told the Great King that Young-hee had already recognized her past mistakes. In the future, she would definitely turn over a new leaf and do things properly. The Great King was deeply moved. He glanced at the stack of hand-copied sutras beside Young-hee's hand. He also saw that her clothes were thin and she only had a simple hairpin inserted into her hair. She looked extremely gentle and lovely. His heart couldn't help but be moved. Arbor listened to the Crown Prince's story as if he was listening to a story. He couldn't help but curiously widen his large eyes and ask, "And then the Great King brought Young-hee out?" "He didn't." Mo Lien said irritably, "He wanted to take it, That would depend on whether he had the face to do so. He's going to go get her now. He personally ordered that person to be thrown into the cold palace. How long had it been and he wanted to bring her out? Wasn't that a slap in the face? Did he still want his old face? Chapter 10:10. The little fellow gazed at him with sparkling eyes, and she reached out to touch his displeased handsome face. The Crown Prince was startled, and then he laughed heartily as he plucked this little fellow onto his lap and rubbed her in passing, returning the favor. Xiaoyao happened to be stepping into the room at this moment, and she couldn't help but purse her lips in amusement when she saw this scene. She immediately tactfully turned around and retreated out the door. "All right, there's no need to stand here. Go do your own things." Xiaoyao waved her hand at the rows of junior royal maids standing outside the door, and everyone naturally dispersed. Mo Lien hugged the little person in her arms and reached out to peel pine nuts for her to feed. "Has there been any movement from that Xiang Yuan in your court recently?" Someone came to find her the night before and gave her a small brocade box containing pills. Arbor propped up his small chin with one hand as he ate intermittently. I took a look. It should be a slow-acting poison pill. But Xiang Yuanyuan buried this wooden box under the roots of a tree in her backyard. Mo Lian snorted. She has a bit of a brain. She definitely knew that you would definitely send someone to keep an eye on her. Her doing this is nothing more than pledging allegiance to you. Do you believe that? Arbor shook his head slightly. Previously, she also said that Omega Kotoku sent a group of people especially to kidnap you on the day of the competition. It caused him to nervously make defensive arrangements early on that day. The people from Omega Kotoku didn't come, but that wretched Mu Qianqian came, and it almost disgusted him to death. During this period of time, the Crown Prince hadn't been idle and had been suppressing all of the Mu family's businesses in the capital with all his might. Since they made him suffer, then he had to make the Mu family suffer as well. Sigh. Arbor sighed. Forget it, I won't think about it. In any case, it can't cause any big waves. But I think Omega Kotoku must have his reasons for putting a pawn by your side. Mo Lian stuffed a few pine nuts into her mouth. Why don't we just kick him out? I'm just curious about what she's up to. Arbor punched his little fist. First of all, she's just an ordinary person. You definitely won't be on guard against her. Secondly, she escaped from the Qin estate in the middle of the night and sold you a piece of information. Or was it the poison that he received as a gift from the Qin estate's guards, but was unwilling to use it on you? All these things are conveying the same message to you, to show you their loyalty. It's good that you're curious. Omega Kotoku knows that you're curious and wants you to keep her in the mansion. Prince Mo raised his eyebrows and narrowed his eyes. No matter how she treated you in the past, she's still the same person. I think she's dangerous. If you don't do anything, I'll take care of her for you. If he did make a move, his methods wouldn't be so gentle. Arbor helplessly glanced at him. All right, then let Xiang Yuanyuan leave. Arbor immediately called Xiaoyao over and had Xiaoyao give her some money and food before asking her to leave the Qiao estate. Then he turned his little head to look at the Crown Prince. Satisfied? Prince Mo chuckled and nodded. The two chatted for a while. 10 minutes after the lanterns were lit, Manager Gong brought someone over to deliver the Great King's verbal order. When he saw that the Crown Prince was also present, Gong Chang and instantly felt cold sweat drip down his forehead. Under the Crown Prince's cold gaze, Gong Chang and fearfully announced His Majesty's verbal order. The Crown Princess was ordered to wake up at 3 in the morning tomorrow and personally lead a group of womenfolk to the Nimpan Tower of the Honghai Temple to pray for the country and its people. Chapter 10-11. Omega Kotoku's brush-wielding hand paused for a moment, and he asked without even raising his head, chased out? Yes. A man around 27 or 28 years old stood in front of Omega Kotoku's desk with his head bowed, holding his breath as he waited for the second young master's rage. However, the second young master didn't get angry, but only nodded indifferently. I miscalculated. I didn't expect that she wasn't the least bit curious and didn't keep her. What a heartless fellow. How could young master miscalculate? Wang Chung raised his head and frowned. Our people delivered a secret poison pill to Xiang Yuanyuan the day before yesterday. Until today, eldest Miss Qiao hasn't made any moves, and she doesn't have the slightest intention of chasing her away. Presumably, she's a little curious. Oh? Omega Kotoku put down the brush in his hand, then raised his eyes and glanced indifferently at Wang Chung. You think it was the Crown Prince's idea? Wang Chung nodded without hesitation. According to this subordinate's investigation, the Crown Prince arrived at the Marquis of Jiyuan's estate this evening. Before the lanterns were lit, Miss Qiao sent someone to deliver some soft travel expenses and sent Xiang Yuanyuan away. A jadeite color flitted across Omega Kotoku's eyes, and he smiled faintly. That man is indeed this young master's formidable opponent. Thinking about it carefully, even Shantian Prefecture's people suffered a crushing defeat at his hands. I'm afraid that no one in the lower star domain can take care of him. Wang Chung asked rather anxiously, Young master, should this subordinate make a move and send that Xiang Yuanyuan? He made a throat-slitting gesture, and a murderous look flashed across his eyes. Omega Kotoku waved his hand indifferently. If she's gone, then she's gone. Let her leave the capital in peace. Wang Chung was startled. Then do we need to find Great Master Yi to remove the puppet curse on Xiang Yuanyuan's body? Okay, pluck it. Omega Kotoku nodded slightly, which made Wang Chung even more surprised. However, he didn't dare to look at his young master for too long. After a glance, he quickly lowered his head again. His heart was filled with bewilderment. Usually, second young master would send people to clean up such useless chess pieces, but today. Second young master actually let that girl Xiang Yuanyuan go. He even planned to remove the puppet spell on Xiang Yuanyuan's body and let her go. Was this for Miss Chao's sake? Second young master Qin waved his hand with a weary expression, dismissing this subordinate of his to leave as he sighed inwardly. Since he couldn't stay by her side, this little chess piece was useless. He couldn't control where he went. Second young master's heart softened. Wang Chung retreated, and a murderous look flashed across his eyes. Just as he was about to turn around and leave, he heard Omega Kotoku's cold voice ring in his ear. Wang Chung, I want her to leave safely. Don't go against me behind my back. You know what I'm capable of. Wang Chung's murderous aura had just emerged, but it was suddenly shaken off. He hurriedly nodded and retreated from the young master's room with a face full of dust. His heart was filled with horror. How could he forget that the young master hated it when people acted one way in front of him and another behind his back? A moment later, several men in short green robes appeared beside Wang Chung and bowed. Go and ask Great Master Yi to remove the curse on Miss Xiang's body. You guys escort Miss Xiang out of the capital. Don't make any mistakes. Yes. The subordinates immediately dispersed and left to carry out their orders. Chapter 10-12. Meanwhile, in the central palace, Palace maid Hexiang entered the beaded curtains and bowed in accordance with the rules. Empress Xiao gently set down the teacup she was holding. She didn't say anything. The crown princess didn't say anything. The crown prince was also present at the time, and his expression was very displeased. Empress Xiao sighed. She didn't know what to say about her son's protectiveness. Old Nanny Huaxian said softly, but that's true. The crown princess will depart for the Mystic Beast Forest secret realm the day after tomorrow. It's a bit rushed for her to head to the Honghai Temple to pray for blessings. Moreover, the crown princess is currently in mourning. Empress Xiao faintly glanced at the old nanny. As the crown princess, she naturally has to prioritize the safety of the Mo kingdom. Huaxian lowered her head and answered, yes. Hexiang bowed and helped Empress Xiao get up to walk behind the curtains. This consort doesn't want to get involved. Let's just watch. I reckon there's still a big show to be played out. Empress Xiao's lips tugged into a mocking smile. Today, she had received definite news that the great king had relented and added Yonghe's name to his entourage. On the day of praying, Arbor woke up early and washed her face. Everything was done in an orderly manner. She was in mourning, so she naturally wore a mourning dress. Since the great king and the queen didn't dislike her mourning dress and specially ordered her to pray for blessings, she naturally didn't care about these mundane matters. The people participating in the praying today included the imperial concubines, princesses, and commandery princesses, as well as the womenfolk of third-rank officials and above. The majestic group of people gathered at the Dongshan gate before the hour. They quietly waited for the crown princess's carriage to arrive before heading to the Honghai Temple together. Nimpan Tower was said to be the guardian pagoda of the kingdom because a monk once saved the late king's life. From then on, the many monks of the Honghai Temple had a meteoric rise. Not only did the Honghai Temple become the Mo Kingdom's national temple, the Nimpan Tower within it was also given the title of National Pagoda. It was said that it could protect the safety of the country. If one went to the Nimpan Tower to burn incense, they would get whatever they prayed for. The rumors were quite realistic. The entire pagoda had 9 floors, and it stood high above the Fu Mountain near the northern city gate. There was a saying that the Fu Mountain was 10,000 zhang tall and the mountain range was stacked with emerald green. Arbor got off the carriage and saw from afar that the abbot of the Honghai Temple was leading a group of people to greet them at the entrance. "Greetings, Crown Princess." The abbot of the Honghai Temple looked to be in his 70s, but it was said that he was over 100 years old. Arbor nodded. "Grandmaster, you don't have to be so courteous. If you're ready, let's start." Praying for blessings was just a process. After leading a group of women to pray and burn incense, she had to sweep the Nimpan Tower to show her sincerity. Of course, she didn't have to sweep from top to bottom. She just had to go in and show her sincerity. If this process went smoothly, they would probably be able to eat and rest by noon. By evening, they would be able to go home. But if it didn't go smoothly, a cold light flashed through Arbor's eyes. She didn't mind spilling blood on the spot. Apart from the crown princess, consort Cheng, Lu Fei, and imperial concubine Lin were the most respected people in this group. More than half of the women were ordinary people, and half of them were old. They were used to living like princes, so it was a bit unbearable for them to kneel and offer incense under the gradually rising sun. Arbor didn't look sideways. She only glanced at her mother and sister. Chapter 10-13. Wei Ziqin and Xiao Lin were both very spirited. They were mystic cultivators, so their physical strength and mystic conscious were different from normal people's. This bit of torment was simply nothing to them. Arbor then retracted her gaze and went through the blessing ceremony according to the procedure. She even purposely followed the most tedious and strict procedure, putting in the effort to save face. In any case, she wasn't tired. Since she had to come here early in the morning to offer incense, she would go through the most tedious and formal ceremony and make those orioles and swallows behind her suffer greatly. With the incense mist surrounding her, this bunch of royal concubines, princesses, and madams couldn't bite her out of anger. The master abbot couldn't help but exclaim in admiration as he looked at her young age, yet she was willing to endure hardships and pray for the kingdom and its people. Sure enough, it was already 10:00 in the afternoon by the end of this procedure. Everyone's stomachs were rumbling with hunger because of her, especially the elderly concubines and madams like consort Cheng who didn't move much all day. Their faces were all pale, and their heads were dizzy from the sun's rays as they complained incessantly in their hearts. Those young princesses, commandery princesses, and young misses were also lamenting that they couldn't take it anymore. They had set out from their homes before 3 in the morning, but they had only freaking eaten a bit of breakfast and pastries. Some of them had even courted disaster by coming on an empty stomach. This time, they had already been tormented until noon, yet they hadn't even had a sip of water. This crown princess deliberately wanted to kill them all in this temple. At this moment, they were all extremely envious and jealous that Commandery Princess Yian, who was attending to the Queen Dowager, didn't come along. The fourth princess, Mo Shuang, had also been grounded at home by the old great king due to her well-known indiscretions, so she couldn't come. Originally, they were more or less mocking this fourth princess who didn't have any status, but now, they really wanted to cry. They were so envious that the princess didn't have to suffer this. The crown princess was refreshed and in high spirits. She wasn't out of breath at all after going through this tedious prayer process. Honghai Temple's abbot, Venerable Master Konghui, clasped his hands together in admiration and said, "The crown princess is so young, yet she is not afraid of hardship and worries about the kingdom and its people. Her qualities are especially commendable." His string of praises made consort Cheng and company so angry that they were seeing stars. "Your Highness!" Suddenly, a cry of alarm was heard. A palace maid accompanying her hurriedly used her body to support Lu Fei's falling body. It turned out that Lu Fei was tired and hungry. Her body couldn't bear it and she fainted first. The crown princess walked forward expressionlessly and glanced at Lu Fei. Suddenly, she raised her hand and said, "Someone, bring a basin of ice water and splash it." Lu Fei, who had fainted, suddenly stood up and waved her hands, "No need, no need." This consort only fainted for a moment. I feel much better now. At the end of her speech, Lu Fei looked at the strange gazes of the monks around her. She was so embarrassed that she felt embarrassed. After pretending to faint for less than a second, the crown princess caught him red-handed. Was there anything more cruel and merciless than this? The corners of everyone's mouths twitched, but in their hearts, they wanted to cry but had no tears. If pretending to faint was useful, they all wanted to faint. 8th Princess Mo, you had been holding it in for a long time. At this time, she finally couldn't hold it in anymore and burst into laughter. She could tell that today, this stoic-faced sister-in-law was harboring the idea of torturing these consorts and madams to death and was openly tormenting them. The crown princess looked at them solemnly and said, "This crown princess is going to sweep the Nimpin Tower." Chapter 10:14. Everyone let out a sigh of relief, thinking to themselves, "Oh my, it's finally over. Thank the heavens, they can finally return to their rooms to rest, drink water and eat." Unexpectedly, the crown prince consort's face tightened as she said in an especially cold and merciless tone, "Before that, all of you must kneel here and face my great Mo kingdom's guardian pagoda. Pray to the heavens in unison and wait for this crown prince consort to finish sweeping the pagoda and come out." Consort Cheng's body trembled as she fell onto the body of the palace maid behind her. The group of concubines were about to cry. "Why are you all looking at this crown princess with such bitter faces? Could it be that you didn't come here with sincerity to pray for our Mo kingdom citizens?" The crown princess coldly scolded, "You can't even endure a little bit of suffering after praying for a day? Then why don't I see you all complaining about your daily lives of luxury and being provided for by the Mo kingdom citizens? You have to take responsibility for the treatment you enjoy. When we return to the palace, I will definitely report this matter to the great king and the queen in detail. This crown princess has seen and remembered every single one of your actions. I definitely won't slander any of you." The crown princess spoke with conviction, angering the group of concubines and madams into speechlessness. Wei Ziqin speechlessly looked at her daughter. At first, she also thought that her daughter was going to complete this blessing ceremony with an especially serious and devout attitude. But halfway through, she felt that something was wrong. This was blatantly punishing those imperial concubines in broad daylight. She didn't mind kneeling for a while. She had been tossing and turning since early morning and had only secretly drunk a bit of holy water, but now she didn't feel tired at all. Xiao Lin didn't have to worry about her at all. Her small face was rosy, and only a few drops of sweat seeped out of the tip of her nose. Her eyes were shining as she looked at her older sister. On the other hand, those pitiful concubines and madams, when had they ever suffered so much? At this moment, all the concubines had silently made a very important decision. Next time, if the great king had the idea of having the crown princess lead a team for some activity, they would definitely raise both hands and feet to oppose it to the end. They strongly requested Her Majesty the Queen to lead the team. The Queen should be the one to come to this prayer event. She had just thrown in the towel and quit, and in the end, this fiend had come and killed them all. Everyone unanimously decided that they would not allow the black-hearted crown princess to participate in any large-scale activities in the future. At this time, darling Qiao didn't know that by making an example out of her, she had saved her from a lot of trouble in the future. The monks in the temple began to call out their names. The last word, kneel, made Consort Cheng and the others groan in their hearts. They forced themselves to kneel down miserably. Kneeling down was not the end. He still had to accompany the monks in the temple to pray to God until the crown princess came back from sweeping the pagoda. Everyone secretly cried out in their hearts, "Crown princess, we beg you. Don't sweep the pagoda, let's go back." The crown princess figure disappeared from everyone's despairing eyes. Woo-woo, this silly crown princess, she wouldn't really sweep the pagoda floor by floor, right? Then would they be able to drink some water before evening and go home? Once the pagoda door closed, Arbor's expression turned completely cold. His figure flashed, and he arrived at the top of the 9-story pagoda at the fastest speed. His gaze coldly looked at the man and woman tied up in the middle of the pagoda. Long time no see. Chapter 10:15. Woo woo. The woman who was tied up in the middle of the group of men began to mutter incoherently. While setting up a soundproof defensive boundary, Xiaomu nodded her small chin in that direction. Stay Up Late took out a rag stuffed in Younghee's mouth. That's right, the woman tied up in the middle of the 9-story tower was Younghee, who had once been favored, but was now buried deep in the mud. The dwarf tied up beside Younghee was Black Cat, who had been captured by the Crown Prince. This Lord Black Cat, at this moment, looked as if there was not a single piece of good flesh on its body. It had been tormented to the point that it was already on the verge of death. Are you surprised? Are you surprised? Arbor walked over to Younghee with small steps, a cold smile on his face. What are you doing? Little witch. Zhengru's entire body trembled, and her eyes were filled with terror. The way he looked at Xiaomu was like he was looking at a devil that had walked out from hell. You still don't understand? Xiaomu swept her a disdainful glance before gently tucking the strands of hair that had fallen in front of her eyes behind her head. She said lightly, I want you to die. Stay Up Late lowered his head and tried his best to pretend that he didn't see anything. He was like an old monk sitting in meditation. I thought that you would stop after entering the cold palace. Who knew that you would be so stupid? Xiaomu sighed and glanced at Ao Yi, who was beside her. You tell her. It was tiring to talk to such an idiot. Stay Up Late's mouth twitched. He cleared his throat and said, You hired some beggars on the streets and alleys to spread rumors about the appearance of a demon and disaster. At first, we didn't know who set this trap. But the Crown Princess could sense that this was directed at her. Ao Yi truly admired their young Crown Prince Consort. She was able to sniff out something unusual from such a brainless incident. The Crown Princess knew that the mastermind wouldn't let this go. She left the capital for a few days to give us time to investigate. Most importantly, the Crown Prince managed to pry open the dwarf's mouth and found out many things. For example, he gave you a strong revival pill and lied to you that you had recovered. He wanted you to deal with the Crown Princess. In fact, once 7 days are up, you will turn into a pile of flesh and blood. Your body will never recover. Zhengru screamed, Impossible. My face and body have already recovered. Don't deceive yourself and others anymore. Xiaomu scoffed, Your face starts rotting at night, right? The Yuxingzi I put in the beautifying pill is a heat poison. Not everyone can cure it. It's you. It's you. Courtesan Zheng shrieked in horror as she glared at Xiaomu, her eyes about to split open. Beautifying pill? What beautifying pill? Could it be that? The beautifying pill that her brother had tried so hard to obtain had been tampered with by the little Crown Princess? Ah! Thinking of this, Zhengru's chest was filled with depression, and she almost immediately screamed crazily. I want to see the Great King, I want to see the Great King. Let me out. The Great King, I want to see the Great King. Didn't you plan a play for me? Xiaomu gazed disdainfully at Courtesan Zheng before saying coldly, I'll rearrange this play for you to make it even more exciting. Broken Dreams. Chapter 10:16. Younghee trembled as she looked at Arbor, not knowing what to do. You, what are you doing? You witch! What are you trying to do? I want to see the Great King. The Great King, the Great King. Ah! Witch? Xiaomu muttered these 2 words in amusement. With a slight movement of her slender fingers, she took out 2 talismans glowing with blue light from her inner world and tossed one of them to Ao Yi, who was standing beside her. Then, as you wish. The 2 figures disappeared before Younghee's eyes as fast as lightning. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Why? They disappeared before her eyes in the blink of an eye. What kind of talisman did that witch use? Ah! What Younghee felt at the last second was perhaps endless fear, or perhaps endless regret and despair. She knew very well that the bottom of Nimpin Tower had already been hollowed out by Mammy Su and the people from Shuntian Prefecture. They had filled it with a powerful weapon. Once the time was up, they would not hesitate to set the tower on fire. Originally, the one to enjoy all this pain and fear would be that little bitch, the crown princess. But now, it was her turn to wait here in panic. No matter how much she screamed, her voice was blocked by the defensive enchantment. Until death, no one appeared before her. Boom! The people worshipping in front of the pacification pagoda were the first to feel the ground tremble slightly. Then, their expressions changed drastically as they stood up. Xiao Yao grabbed Wei Zichin's wrist and whispered in her ear, "Madam, don't worry. The crown princess sent a message to Xiao Yao. She has safely left Nimpen Tower. Madam and young miss, just wait and see what happens next." Wei Zichin's anxious heart finally calmed down, and she slowly heaved a sigh of relief. Wei Zichin pulled her daughter and retreated to the side of the crowd with Xiao Yao. Wei Zichin looked coldly at the chaotic scene in front of her. At this moment the entire Nimpen Tower was affected by the explosion and was leaning to the left. Bricks and dust mixed with the glass ceiling fragments fell down one after another. For a moment, the monks in the temple wailed and prostrated themselves on the ground. The group of concubines and madams were also extremely surprised. They all covered their heads and temporarily lay on the ground without moving. Some of the bolder ones raised their eyes and stared blankly as Nimpen Tower collapsed and disappeared inch by inch in front of them. After this fiery explosion was repeated 3 times, more than half of the Nimpen Tower had collapsed, leaving behind only a small portion of the tower's wreckage. The group of concubines looked at the dilapidated ruins with fear. They were supported by their respective palace maids in a daze and barely managed to stand up. Although Consort Cheng was also surprised, she was the first to recover her wits. Her eyes flashed as she said, "Someone come quickly. This is bad. The crown princess is still in Nimpen Tower and hasn't come out yet." Lu Fei couldn't help but sneer when she heard this. The crown princess is really funny. She just stepped into Nimpen Tower and the entire tower exploded. Just how much does this pacification pagoda dislike the crown prince consort? The vassal king consort of an Anan also sneered. If you want to condemn someone, you can always find a pretext. Princess Consort's words are too hurtful. If you don't have concrete evidence, it's better not to speak carelessly. Otherwise, you will inevitably have a bad reputation for being disrespectful to the Eastern Palace consort. A thin and weak voice suddenly sounded with slight ridicule. "Noble Lady Ying, you." Princess Anam's expression abruptly changed. A small noble lady dared to mock her, Princess Anam. How hateful. Chapter 10:17. This concubine was only giving advice out of goodwill. Noble Lady Ying spoke softly with a delicate and bashful appearance, causing the vassal king consort of an Anan to feel extremely disgusted. Preposterous. This princess consort still needs you to give advice. I was also worried about the crown princess's safety, that's why. You don't need to worry about this crown princess's safety. An icy voice broke the current clamor. It silenced all the voices in the room. The vassal king consort of an Nan is truly imposing. Arbor was dressed in a white robe and only used a simple white jade hairpin to tie her hair into a young girl's bun. She walked over with a calm and composed expression. Consort Cheng gaped in shock, but she immediately lowered her eyes submissively. "Crown Princess," everyone called out in unison. Arbor used an icy and judgmental gaze to observe this Princess Anam, who had an unsightly expression, and pursed her small lips in ridicule. The descendants who fought alongside the late king are indeed extraordinary. You can even look down on the great king's beloved concubine. Then presumably, the great king doesn't hold much significance in your hearts. Crown Princess, don't speak nonsense. Princess Anam nervously tightened the embroidered handkerchief in her hand. How serious were these words? What did she mean by the great king doesn't hold much significance in their hearts? Did she mean that their vassal king of an Nan's estate could look down on even the great king? Looking down on the great king, confiscating their property and exterminating their entire family was considered a light punishment. This damned little bitch, every word of hers struck at the heart. Her mouth was truly deadly vicious. If it weren't for the fact that there were so many people surrounding them, she really wanted to slap this stoic face in front of her. She was truly too hateful. Just a few words were enough to stab at her heart. Princess Anam pretended to cover her chest with her hands, pretending that her heart was in pain from being provoked by the crown princess. Arbor sneered, the vassal king of an Anan's consort. I advise you not to challenge my bottom line again and again. I'm not what you think I am, a flower in a greenhouse. Have you heard of the snow domain divine flower? This is an extremely miraculous divine herb that only blooms in the coldest and coldest places. The little stoic walked towards Princess Anam step by step, causing her body to subconsciously lean backwards. Usually, when someone gets close to it and touches it once or twice, it won't have any reaction. The third time, when it gets angry, it will suddenly open all of its petals. Arbor waved his sleeve slightly. It was just a subtle and casual movement. However, Wu Hongma was pierced by her cold eyes. Her heart trembled slightly, and she involuntarily took a big step back. The beautiful divine flower of the snow domain has sharp icicles within its petals. TSK, it swallowed that person alive. Not even a trace of bone remains. Arbor stared at her with a chilly gaze. That scene was truly very beautiful. I'm afraid none of you can imagine it. Everyone simultaneously sucked in a cold breath. Princess Anam, how do you think this crown princess compares to the divine flower of the snow domain divine flower? Are we similar? Wu Hongma actually couldn't say a word, and cold sweat slowly slid down her forehead. Arbor's expression was still as he coldly ordered, someone. Thoroughly investigate everyone present and find out who isn't present right now. Tell me your name right now. When the order was issued, the royal concubines and princesses all looked at each other and subconsciously squeezed into the crowd. They looked at this stoic-faced little crown princess with bewilderment and uncertainty. Chapter 10:18. Was she going to investigate thoroughly now? These noblewomen had suffered quite a bit of shock, and now all they wanted to do was to go home with a sullen face. But now, the crown princess still refused to let them go. They really wanted to cry. If Her Majesty the Queen had led the group to pray for blessings today, there probably wouldn't be so many twists and turns happening. Reporting to the crown princess. Aoe brought a group of people and pretended to investigate, then came forward to report, all the concubines, princesses, infanta, madams, and young misses, as well as their accompanying maids are all here. When everyone heard this, they all let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the maids around them didn't cause any trouble for them. Only Jingru, who received the Great King's verbal order to come with the group, is missing. Jingru? Wasn't that the former consort Zheng? Everyone hurriedly turned around and searched for Younghee's figure back and forth. Sure enough, after looking around, they couldn't see her. That person was truly a person with means. She had entered and left the cold palace several times and was still one of the Great King's beloved concubines. It was said that this time, she had asked the Great King's special order to follow the group to Fushan Honghai Temple to pray for blessings and repent. At that time, she would stay in the temple to continue praying for the Empress Dowager and the Great King for 3 more months. Everyone's attitude towards Jingru along the way couldn't be considered cold. In fact, there was even a hint of eagerness. This was because they all felt that as long as Jingru sincerely prayed for blessings in the temple for 3 months, even if she couldn't temporarily restore the title of consort Zheng, the Great King would definitely promote her from the position of a palace maid. There was no other way. Consort Zheng was the Great King's true love. As long as she stood in front of the Great King's heart would be unreasonably biased. But now, everything seemed to be developing towards an unexpected and strange ending. Jingru wasn't actually present. Then where could she go? The madams looked at each other and then closed their mouths in silence. Very quickly, the drama entered the highest and most shocking stage. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Aoyi and his men found courtesan Zheng's body, which had been blown beyond recognition, in the ruins of the pacification tower. Only a small part of her body was left. The expressions of the concubines and madams changed subtly. Consort Cheng even glanced at the crown princess's cold, expressionless face more than once. The crown princess stood there expressionlessly with her hands folded in front of her and her back straight. Glancing at courtesan Zheng, who had been carried over, the crown prince consort flew into a rage. Preposterous! Master Konghui had made it clear that only the great king, the crown prince, and the crown princess were allowed to enter the pagoda. Why was the little Young-hee inside? What identity did she use to go in? There was complete silence. No wonder she attracted the wrath of the 9 heavens and caused the pagoda to explode. This demoness who brought disaster to the country deserves to die. What a pity that the pagoda was implicated by her. The corners of Stay Up Late's mouth twitched. Venerable Master Konghui also wept sorrowfully, and he led the monastery's monks to kneel down before Qiaomu. He wailed miserably, "I implore the crown prince consort to uphold justice for the entire Great Sea Monastery. Punish this demoness who brought disaster to the country. Give our Honghai temple justice." The old nanny beside Consort Cheng tugged at Consort Cheng. Consort Cheng snapped out of her daze and quickly said with a serious expression, "Young-hee was so daring to sneak into the pagoda and bring disaster to the country. I implore the crown princess to uphold justice for the Honghai temple." Chapter 10-19. Crown Princess, please uphold justice for the monks of the Honghai temple. Investigate this matter thoroughly, and restore peace and tranquility to the Honghai temple. The group of madams and young misses were all shrewd people. They all followed Consort Cheng and bowed to the crown princess in unison. Aoyi coughed lightly, and Lightning, who had been waiting impatiently for a long time, scurried out of the pagoda ruins with a swoosh. He shouted loudly for everyone to hear, "Crown Princess, this subordinate has investigated. There's another man in this pagoda." Everyone, This time, whether they heard it or pretended not to, their expressions were extremely strange. This praying activity really tormented those slightly older concubines and madams to the point that their old bones were about to fall apart. When they returned, they became even more determined in their hearts. They absolutely couldn't let the crown princess lead the group again. In the imperial study of the king's palace, the old great king clutched the memorial that his son had sent to him. He clutched it so tightly that the entire memorial was wrinkled, but he didn't realize it. His face was filled with cold anger as he glared at the crown prince. Impossible. The facts are all there. She can't deny it. The crown prince's voice was indifferent. From the day the Luo family troop entered the palace, Young-hee had been in contact with that man. Aren't 3 witnesses enough? This son still has the letters they exchanged as material evidence. Young-hee's trip to the Honghai temple in Fu Mountain this time was simply to meet with someone in secret. She had long planned this. The old great king looked like he had suffered a huge blow. He suddenly slumped into his chair, dejected and at a loss for words. "Royal father, you still don't understand." Mo Lien looked at her old father with cold eyes and said coldly, "Shantian Prefecture has been scheming for a long time. They've done everything possible to control us. Now, they've already brazenly planted someone by your side. Furthermore, they've disregarded your royal authority and fooled around under your nose. This is blatant contempt for you. It's also contempt for our entire Mo family. Do you still need to endure this?" Mo Lien abruptly lifted the corner of her robe and knelt on one knee in front of her father. Her voice was sonorous, forceful, and abnormally cold as she said, "This son requests the order to gather all the mystic cultivators in the country and lead 1,000,000 soldiers to annihilate the remnants of Shantian Prefecture in one fell swoop." "Father, I, Demo, am not afraid of anyone. So what if it was the Shantian Prefecture of the middle 6 prefectures? Do you think the middle 6 constabularies can strut around in our territory? I will prove it to you. In this world, no one can overstep our authority. No one can try to start a war and escape unscathed. From the generation of our ancestors, the Mo family's world has been fought for generation after generation. We don't need to fear anyone. There was no need for him to bow down to any of the mansions. I will use my strength to let them know that Mo is not to be trifled with. What middle 6 constabularies? Tell them to scram back to where they came from. Royal Father, I request Royal Father to issue an edict. Place that nation-wrecking enchantress on the city gate tower and expose her to the sun for 3 days and nights. Whip her 1,000 times during the day and 1,000 times during the night as a warning to others. The great king stared blankly at his son and smiled bitterly. This was his son. He was high-spirited and unrivaled. If he decided to deal with you, he would definitely have all the evidence and make it impossible for you to refute. He had long told Zhengru not to provoke that savage couple, but alas. Write the edict. The great king sighed. The crown prince watched Gong Chang and hurry out to announce the edict while wiping his head of cold sweat. He then slowly walked out of the royal study. Chapter 1020. As he gazed icily at the distant horizon, Mo Lian's lips curled up in a mocking smile. Young He, I want you to die but not enter the royal mausoleum. She meant what she said. Now. She had to bear the title of a country-destroying enchantress and be reviled for generations to come. Speaking of which, didn't you ask for this yourself? The next day. Big news, big news. Honghai Temple's Nimpin Tower really collapsed. All of the citizens of the capital rushed to spread the news and everyone knew about this. They also knew that the great king had decreed that the country-destroying enchantress who caused Nimpin Tower's collapse was to be whipped for 3 days and nights. State Uncle Zheng had been demoted to a commoner, and the Zheng family's mansion had been taken back by the king. All of their assets had been confiscated. The great king had issued a self-condemning edict and locked himself in the king's palace. The citizens all rushed to the city gate tower and spat at Young He's body in disdain, cursing this country-destroying enchantress. But all of this had nothing to do with Arbor. She prepared everything early in the morning. After bidding farewell to her family, she sat in the crown prince's carriage and went with him to the northern city gate. Qin estates Qin Susu, Duan families Duan Siren, Do families Do Fengqi, Fan families Fan Qiuming, and Hong families Hong Boi had all been waiting at the city gate for a long time. Other than Qin Susu, the others all had impatience on their faces. Can we set off now? Do third Miss Do Fengqi asked unhappily. She was ridiculing them in her heart. It really was the crown princess. She had to be escorted by His Highness the Crown Prince the entire way. She was so delicate sitting in the carriage. Did she think she was going on a scenic tour? If she was so delicate, she should stay at home and not come out, so as to not implicate her teammates. Wait. Xiaomu tossed down the curtain and threw them a single word, not intending to explain at all. Do Fengqi was so angry that her pretty face changed color. Qin Susu shrugged indifferently. She walked to a tea stall at the city gate with her sword in her arms and sat down. She ordered half a pot of tea. At this moment, a portion of the agitated crowd ran to State Uncle Zheng's house and threw stones and mud, blocking the Zheng family members at the back door. They threw stones whenever they saw someone coming out. The scene was extremely chaotic. Third Miss Zheng, fifth young Master Zheng, and the others secretly smuggled out some mystic currency and food, but they were confiscated by the imperial court soldiers who chased after them. Those pampered young ladies and young masters were all so anxious that their eyes turned red. They looked like they were fighting with their lives on the line, wanting to take back the private goods they had hidden. It was at this time that Wu Xiaoen rushed over with his brothers. With a glance, he spotted the silent sixth young Master Zheng in the crowd. He promptly berated those agitated passers-by and shoved them to the side, squeezing in front of sixth young Master Zheng. Sixth young master, are you all right? Little sixth Zheng shook his head, his expression somewhat perplexed. When he woke up early in the morning to practice his swordsmanship, he was informed that the great king had sent people to raid the Zheng family's mansion. As a mystic cultivator, all of his important items were placed in his inner world, so the soldiers naturally couldn't come to raid his inner world. However, those half-sisters and half-brothers who shared the same father but had different mothers suffered a calamity. From early in the morning until now, the entire courtyard had been in an uproar. Wu Xiao said anxiously, "Sixth young master, don't worry. I bought a small courtyard for myself in the Mo Kingdom capital. If you don't have a place to stay, you can go there first." "No need." Sixth Zheng shook his head and said, "I'm leaving the city now. I'm afraid I won't be back until a month later." Chapter 10:21. That's fine. A hint of a smile appeared on Wu Xiao's chubby face. "You can contact me after you return. Sixth young master, don't regard me as an outsider." "Old Sixth, what are you saying?" Suddenly, a shriek was heard. Third Miss Zheng couldn't win against several soldiers and could only helplessly watch as her sole bag of mystic currency was snatched away. She scrambled up from the ground in a sorry state and hastily rushed to Sixth Zheng's side. "You don't need to stay, but we need to." Sixth Zheng dodged to the side. Without even looking at Third Miss Zheng, he directly patted Wu Xiao's shoulder. "Let's go." "Fine, then I'll send you off." Wu Xiaoan was also a shrewd person. Upon hearing this, he knew that Sixth young master didn't like his siblings at home at all. Thus, he didn't waste time with them and directly pulled Sixth young master Zheng into his carriage. On the other side, at the northern city gate, Dou Fengqi was impatient to the extreme. She suddenly swept a glance at the Duan family's seventh Miss, Duan Siren. "Seventh Duan, say something. How long are we going to wait like this?" Seventh Miss Duan was a 16-year-old girl with a pair of bright, moist eyes on her round, apple-like face. Upon hearing Dou Fengqi's words, she laughed and said, "Sister Fengqi, if you're impatient from waiting, then go ask the crown princess. When exactly can we set off?" Dou Fengqi relented. How could Arbor, who was sitting inside the carriage, not know of the various impatience of the people outside? However, she couldn't be bothered to pay attention to them. She turned to look at Imo Lien, who was staring at her unblinkingly. "Lien, do you know why those people from Shantian Prefecture went to such great lengths to set up this great drama of nation-wrecking witches, wanting to plant it on my head?" Imo Lien's heart jolted. "Speak." "Because their prefecture lord, that lofty Shantian Prefecture lord, isn't willing for me to lead an easy life." Arbor curled her lips in mockery. "They did this not because they wanted her to die, but because they wanted her to be despised by the crown prince. It would be best if she was stripped of her title as the crown princess, just like how young he was now, being criticized and cursed by the ignorant people. These people had racked their brains and expended all their energy just to make her life miserable. If this life was the same as her previous one, and she was still a weakling, then wouldn't she have to go along with their wishes?" A trace of ruthlessness flitted through Imo Lien's eyes, and he abruptly reached out to pull her into his embrace. He pressed his head against her small head and said in a muffled voice, "This time, I won't accompany you to the Mystic Beast Forest. I already know where Lu Yizhi is hiding from the Black Cat. I went to clean them up before you came back. Jojo, I want to give you a lifetime of peace. I want to protect you. You won't let those rats, insects, snakes, and scorpions of Shantian Prefecture crawl around you anymore. Okay." He spoke softly and lowered his head to plant a light kiss on the top of her head. Arbor nuzzled in his embrace and responded softly and cutely, "Okay." At this time, a commotion came from outside. Dou Fengqi's somewhat high-pitched voice questioned, "Why did you come?" Arbor lifted the carriage curtain with one hand and absent-mindedly jumped out of the carriage. "Little Sixth. Little Sixth Zheng greets your highness the Crown Prince and Crown Princess." Ignoring Dou Fengqi's clamor, Little Sixth Zheng turned to salute the two people. The Crown Prince's judgmental gaze swept over his face before indifferently withdrawing. "Okay, everyone's here. We can go now." Arbor glanced at everyone and nodded. "I have to tell you guys once every day, so you're dreaming." Chapter 1022. The Hong clan's Hong Boi knitted his brows and asked, "Crown Princess, sixth young Master Zheng wants to travel with us. Is there a problem?" Arbor glanced at them and said apathetically, "Didn't you guys make an agreement with the Great King from the start? The 8 great patrician families will only select 4 contestants and have the Great King choose 2 more people to join the team." The implication was that the Great King had only chosen little sixth Zheng, so what else did they want? What was there to be dissatisfied about? Hong Boi and Fan Xiuming's expressions shifted slightly, and they said anxiously, "This is the rule that your family head Xiao set himself." Sensing Arbor's cold gaze on him, Hong Boi could only change his words midway. These are indeed Xiao Dongbua's words. The other patrician family's patriarchs didn't agree, so how can his family's words be accurate? If they acknowledged Arbor's words, then at least one of them would have to be eliminated. Wasn't it obvious that another unlucky fellow would have to be kicked out of the team between Hong Boi and the Fan clan's Fan Xiuming? Among the 6 people, they were the 2 weakest and most likely to be kicked out. However, the 2 of them had come bearing the hopes of their clans, so they naturally couldn't allow themselves to be kicked out with just a few words. Presumably, the Crown Princess is bringing sixth Zheng along because the name list that the Great King submitted actually has 7 people, Qin Susu said indifferently. "Alright, you guys don't need to worry about this. It's getting late, so let's set off early." The Mystic Beast Forest was located at the intersection of the northeast and was rumored to be 5,000 kilometers long. After leaving the Mo Kingdom, it would take about 2 days to head east, even with the War Eagles leading the way. When they reached the Mystic Beast Forest's periphery, they had to disembark and enter on foot. One reason was to avoid being attacked by beasts at high altitudes, and 2 was because the sky above the Mystic Beast Forest was covered in a layer of gray fog all year round. Basically, everyone would take a detour to fly through the gloomy, quiet, and vast forest. No one would foolishly provoke this forest that surpassed everyone's understanding. The 7 eagles leading the way had been waiting outside the city gate for a long time. The passers-by also looked at them curiously. Some people even stopped to look at the vigorous pitch-black eagles with yearning. "Take good care of yourself and act according to your capabilities." Mo Lien reached out to touch her little face and sighed softly with a reluctant look in her eyes. What should he do? He missed her even before they parted ways. This little beauty was really torturous. Xiao Mu patted her chest, indicating for him to set his mind at ease. In the next second, she pursed her lips and smiled at him. Waving her little paw, she turned around and walked out of the city. Mo Lien stared blankly at her departing figure, her mind replaying Jojo's smile. Then, an urgent voice came from afar, "Jojo, Jojo." Duan Yu anxiously ran to Mo Lien's side and blinked as he looked around. "Where's Jojo? Wow, did I come too late? Did she leave already?" Mo Lien harumphed. "She left." Arbor was about to mount the War Eagle when he poked his head out from the city gate. "Duan Yu?" "Fourth brother." 7th Miss Duan also quickly dismounted the War Eagle and ran to the city gate, looking at him joyfully. "Jojo." Duan Yu ran over with a wide grin, completely ignoring 7th Duan's gaze. He directly passed by her and ran to Arbor's side. Chapter 1023. Duan Yu took out a small box and handed it to Arbor. He leaned close to her and whispered, "Here are 10 strengthened core ravaging thunders. Its power is twice as strong as the ones I gave you before. Don't waste so much energy when you're outside. If you encounter those pestering you endlessly all day long, just blast them to death and save yourself the trouble of cleaning up a mess." After he finished speaking, he winked at Arbor darkly. Arbor nodded and very smoothly put away the box into her inner world. "Then I'm leaving. Be good at home and don't fight." Arbor instructed in an extremely good mood as she stretched out her small hand and very naturally patted Duan Yu's dog head. Afterwards, she glanced at the 2 men's exasperated expressions and quickly retracted her gaze before hastily turning to run off. Sigh, to be honest, these 2 people were about the same height, and their figures were equally tall and handsome. One was dressed in a waning black robe with flowing light in his phoenix-like eyes, while the other was dressed in snow-white robes that resembled blooming peach blossoms. Their beauty was earth-shattering. When they stood together as a pair, the scene was so beautiful that it was almost unbearable to look at. Strange, when she was still a baby, she always felt that everyone looked about the same. Especially those youths under the crown prince, she simply couldn't tell who was who. In her small worldview, men actually all looked about the same. So in her opinion, Duan Yu, this guy, was especially eccentric and hilarious. As a man, he kept opening and closing his mouth in front of her all day, narcissistically praising his own good looks. He even mistakenly believed that she was merciful to him because of his looks several times. Haha. Was that possible? But now that she had grown up, her aesthetic standards seemed to have slowly returned to normal. Earlier, she actually inexplicably felt that those two peerless evildoers were simply so beautiful that they could be immortalized in a painting for all eternity. It seemed like face blindness could be cured. She reached out to stroke her expressionless little face. Then, a strange thought popped up in her mind. Could facial paralysis be cured? Arbor mounted the war hawk's back with a slightly conflicted mood. The 7 war hawks soared into the sky and turned into 7 small black dots in the blink of an eye, gradually disappearing from Mo Lien and Duan Yu's sight. Arbor immediately activated his defensive shield and placed himself in a relatively vacuum environment, isolating himself from the strong wind outside. Bored, he took out a packet of preserves and popped one into his mouth. Duan Siren, the 7th young miss of the Duan family, who was flying on her other side, couldn't help but pout when she saw this. A trace of sadness flashed across her rosy apple-like face. "Hey, you still have the mood to eat?" Arbor turned to look at Miss Duan Qi. Duan Yu seemed to dislike his siblings very much. Other than his maternal grandfather, Duan Yu seemed to treat everyone with indifference. Duan Yu clearly saw 7th Duan earlier, but he simply walked past her and didn't even glance at 7th Duan. Therefore, Arbor felt that he didn't need to pay attention to Miss Duan. When Duan Siren saw that she didn't speak, she couldn't help but ask after a while, "Crown Princess, You have a good relationship with 4th brother, right?" Arbor turned to look at her. "Didn't you see it?" This guy was asking the obvious, trying to find something to talk about. Didn't he know that speaking was very tiring? She had no choice but to speak so much when dealing with those orioles and swallows. After returning, she was so tired that she collapsed on the bed and fell asleep. Duan Siren hung her head and bit her lips. Then can you help us persuade him?" Chapter 1024. There are some things that you should also know. Duan Siren sighed softly and said, "His mother is my youngest aunt. She's a normal person without mystic energy. Ever since youngest aunt and someone," Duan Siren said vaguely, "gave birth to 4th brother, the two of them have always been despised by the clansmen. Thankfully, Grandpa has always doted on the two of them. With Grandpa's protection, youngest aunt and 4th brother have been living quite well. Ever since 4th brother's talent was unearthed, Grandpa valued and doted on him even more. Rumors even started circulating in the clan that Grandpa intends to let 4th brother inherit the position of the next patriarch." Arbor swept her an icy glance and said aloofly, "So some of you couldn't restrain yourselves and made a move?" "Right. Because of Grandpa's doting, some of the clansmen targeted him and his mother very much." Duan Siren said quietly, "Several years ago, when Grandpa was in closed-door cultivation, some of the clansmen took advantage of his absence to injure Aunt and abuse and humiliate her. So in a fit of rage, he abandoned the Duan clan's surname and left the clan with Aunt to find a place to settle down. Now, although Grandpa brought the two of them back, his gaze whenever he looked at my clansmen was very frightening. And he also turned a blind eye to me and treated me like a stranger." Arbor harumphed and then tossed a candied fruit into his mouth. "You're telling me all this because you want me to persuade him to reconcile with you?" At that time, some of the clansmen were young and impetuous and didn't know how to control their temper, so. What a joke. If someone insulted, abused, and beat up my mother, I would have long turned them into ashes and ceased to exist. Now, Duan, you spared your wretched lives out of consideration for Patriarch Duan. Not only are you not deeply grateful, you even dare to complain. Arbor grumbled, shameless. After saying that, he was no longer willing to waste words with Duan's siren and directly patted the war hawk's head, urging it to quickly fly forward and leaving Duan's siren behind. Seventh Miss Duan stared blankly at the girl who left her behind and ran off without saying a word and pinched her fingers in displeasure. Idiot, Arbor muttered under his breath. Seeing him grinning all day long and looking like a carefree fool, and not saying anything, she knew nothing about these things at all. If he had said earlier that Duan Yubing was his enemy, she would have gotten rid of him during the competition. How could she have let him go home with his pathetic life? Sixth Zheng and the rest didn't know what was going on with the two girls. Arbor immediately got far away from Duan's siren and patted the eagle's head. It flapped its wings and rushed to the first position. Dou Fengqi suppressed a trace of cold anger in her eyes. He rode his war eagle to Duan 7's side and asked casually, "What's wrong, Duan 7? Did you have a conflict with the crown princess?" "It's nothing." Duan Qi shook his head. He didn't want to talk too much. He shouted softly and let the war eagle fly forward. They flew like this for nearly 2 days, only occasionally eating and drinking to relieve themselves. War Eagle's stamina was about to be overdrawn. In any case, they weren't far from the small adventurer base on the outskirts of the Mystic Beast Forest. It would only take 5 minutes to walk from here. However, just as everyone was about to land, another eagle team appeared on the horizon. Chapter 1025. The leading eagle didn't allow for any explanation as it fiercely rammed into Sixth Zheng's eagle. Unhurried, little Sixth Zheng controlled the defensive barrier with one hand and unsheathed his long sword with the other, attacking without any explanation. What kind of joke was this? Someone was directly charging at him. Could it be that he was a herbivore? His mystic energy surged forward, stirring up clanging sounds in the air. The newcomer sat steadily on the eagle's back and sneered at little Sixth Zheng. With a wave of his hand, the 4 or 5 eagles behind him screeched and pounced at little Sixth Zheng with lightning speed, wanting to tear him apart. Where did this fool come from, provoking without saying a word? Arbor was enraged, and he directly stood up from the eagle's back, shouting angrily, "Are you all fools? You're not moving even when you're being bullied? Are you waiting to get rid of your teammates before it's your turn?" Qin Susu was the first to react. Patting the eagle's back, she flew to little Sixth Zheng's side and drew her sword, shooting out a mystic light. "Crown Princess, it's those guys from the Easterning Nation." The Easterning Nation? How could Arbor possibly know them? Without saying a word, she threw a punch at an approaching eagle, sending it flying back more than 10 steps. If the Easterning Nation man on the eagle's back hadn't been tightly hugging the eagle's neck, he would probably have already fallen off and died on the spot. His complexion was pale, and he was so angry that he screeched, "Damn Northern Mo people, you're so gutsy. You dare to be so brazen and provoke us in our eastern region." Apart from Dou Fengqi, the 6 people all moved to confront the Easterning Nation. The 6 people and 6 war eagles lined up in a row. The other side was led by 2 people, followed by 5 or 6 attendants. Among the 2 leaders, one of them was a small man with an ordinary face. He was taciturn and didn't make much noise. The one who was jumping up and down and hooting the most was the other person, who was currently wantonly cursing Northern Mo. Qiao Mu originally thought that the taciturn man was considered short, but she didn't expect that the other fool was even more ridiculously short. He was about the height of an 11 or 12-year-old child. Even though he was standing high and mighty on the eagle's back, he was still a short winter melon. "Shut up." Arbor was annoyed by his noisy chatter. He raised his hand and threw out a row of concealed weapons. 5 or 6 attendants heard the sound of something breaking through the air and couldn't help but be shocked. They hurriedly rushed forward to block in front of their master. One of the attendants was hit by a hidden weapon and fell off the eagle's back. Even if he didn't die, he would be half dead. "Ah!" You damned woman! The short man shouted angrily. Standing on the eagle's back, he waved his hands and feet as if he was doing an awkward dance. At this time, the short wintermelon's subordinate lowered his voice and said a few words to the man. The short wintermelon immediately looked at Arbor with bright eyes. There was a trace of indescribable excitement in his pair of dim yellow eyes. Your northern prince Mo's consort. Who I am has nothing to do with you. Arbor bluntly stabbed him. Are you qualified to ask? You! The short wintermelon was so angry that his face turned ashen. Standing on the eagle's back, he crossed his arms and said in a lofty tone, seeing that you're still a young woman, I won't bicker with you. Come to my side immediately. Now! Northern Prince Mo's consort, I am Easterning Nation's crown prince. I now allow you to enter my palace and become my woman. I cannot disdain you, but you have to show me your loyalty. Was this person an idiot? Chapter 10:26. Even though Fengqi had an incredulous expression as she glared at that Easterning Kingdom short winter melon who was talking to himself. Pfft! Qin Susu snickered rudely, which then developed into a belly laugh. Are you sure you're not here to amuse yourself? Easterning Kingdom's crown prince was such an idiot. No wonder Easterning Kingdom had been beaten to a small coastal island by Northern Imo and hadn't dared to move for so many years. What are you laughing at? As if sensing Qin Susu's mockery, the Easterning Kingdom's crown prince, that short winter melon with a flat nose and a round face who really didn't pass muster, glowered at Qin Susu. Don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Let me tell you. Even if I can't deal with all of you now, once we enter the mystic realm, heh. Humph. Kill him, Arbor berated impatiently. Where did this idiot come from? He wasn't even willing to waste words with him. Several ghostly figures abruptly appeared in midair. Lightning and several other hidden guards directly attacked without a word, grabbing at the short winter melon's neck. Ah! The short winter melon cried out in shock, as if unable to react to the fact that the crown princess actually had so many hidden guards by her side. He angrily shrieked, "You're breaking the rules. How can you bring so many people? Your Northern Imo kingdom only has 6 quotas to enter the mystic realm at most." Everyone stared at him like they were looking at an idiot. You idiot, why do you view the world so differently? Are we in the mystic realm right now? We haven't even entered the mystic beast forest yet. Didn't you also bring a group of attendants? Why can't the Grand Northern Prince Imo, consort, bring people? Even though Fengqi couldn't resist bursting into laughter. Oh my! Do all Easterning Kingdom's people have this kind of IQ? Then don't embarrass yourselves by entering the mystic realm. Because it's useless even if you enter. With this kind of IQ of a 3.5-year-old, I'm afraid you'll be courting death if you enter. Stop! The Easterning Kingdom's leader who had been silent all this time finally spoke up. Third brother, save me. Third brother. The crown prince was so scared that he pissed his pants. He patted the eagle under his butt and ran to that person. The silent third prince Fa frowned coldly. He dodged Arbor's pouncing body and rode the Black Hawk to Arbor and the others. He cupped his hands in greeting and said in a polite manner, ever since the crown prince was overly frightened a few years ago, he would occasionally become delirious. Please forgive him. Qin Susu and the others couldn't help but burst out laughing again. Looks like his brain isn't working well. Little Six Jing shook his head solemnly, and he turned to say to Arbor, Miss Chiao, since the other party has a mental problem, then let's not bicker with him, okay? Chiao Mu nodded nonchalantly on the surface, but she spat out icily, slap her. Paw! Lightning, who was closest to the crown prince, slapped the crown prince's face without saying a word. Ah! Caught off guard, the crown prince staggered and fell down from the Black Hawk's back. The third prince Fa hastily turned the Black Hawk's head and rushed up to catch the crown prince. Just as he turned his head and was about to angrily reprimand him, he saw a black streak of light shoot straight at the person in his hands. Cold sweat immediately broke out all over his body, and the third Prince Fa hastily wanted to throw the crown prince behind him. But no sooner said than done. Arbor's figure flitted across the sky like a ghost, arriving beside the two Eastern Kingdom's princes in the blink of an eye. Chapter 10:27. The Vajra talismans in her hands were as sturdy as iron, and she directly grabbed the heads of the two black eagles and snapped them. Eldest Crown Prince, Third Crown Prince. The two crown princes of the Eastern Kingdom also fell to the ground along with the eagle heads. Arbor patted her two small hands that were as white as jade and swept a cold glance over the fallen Eastern people. Such karma is due for shooting off your mouth. Little Sixth Zheng's mouth silently twitched. That's right. With the crown princess's vengeful personality, that Eastern Kingdom's eldest crown prince naturally had to be half-dead or half-dead for teasing her with such filthy words. It's said that the Eastern Kingdom previously had 3 crown princes. The second crown prince's mother is the queen and has the strongest backing. However, he was secretly poisoned in a battle a year ago, Duan Siren said. Arbor pursed her small lips non-committally. She wasn't interested in knowing this. She pressed the warhawk to land on her own and Arbor looked around. Her mood improved slightly when she didn't see that group of Eastern Kingdom people discussed her. Let's go. Little Sixth Zheng and the others followed her to her side. After resting here for a while, the warhawks would naturally return to Northern Imo in a well-trained manner, so they didn't need to worry about this. The place they were currently at was one of the only 2 adventurer bases in the entire Mystic Beast Forest within a radius of 5,000 kilometers. The other adventurer base had to cross the Mystic Beast Forest tens of thousands of kilometers and was located near the western region. They definitely couldn't go there at the moment. Arbor's group walked to the entrance of the adventurer base and could see a row of people vigilantly patrolling back and forth at the entrance from afar. There were also 4 to 5 base guards keeping watch in the battle towers on both sides. Just as Arbor's group reached the entrance, they were politely stopped. Guests from afar, if you wish to enter our adventurer base, you must first register and pay a certain fee. Arbor's group nodded in understanding. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. There was nothing much to say about this, so they naturally sent someone to register and pay the fee. Fan Shuming had the air of a scholar, so everyone sent him to register and negotiate. Not long after, Fan Shuming ran over with a troubled expression. He rubbed his hands and said, "Everyone has to pay a dough of food to register." A duel? Fuck, what kind of lousy adventurer's base is this? They're asking for too much. A dough of grain contained 10 liters of grain, which was enough to feed an ordinary family for a month. This was just an adventurer's base. They would only be resting for 2 nights at most. To have to pay so much, it was simply like eating people whole and not spitting out their bones. Little Sixth, I'll pay for you. After throwing down this sentence, Xiaomu followed after the beaming base guide. What kind of better treatment? If Miss can afford 3 dough of food, you can stay in a luxurious house for free for 3 days. Oh. Miss, this way. You can register here. The guide felt that he had been led astray by Arbor. He smiled and gestured for them to enter. In the next second, a small, bouncy fist landed on his chubby face with a bang. Did this old fellow take her for a fool? Did she look like she was easy to be slaughtered? A moment later, after a bout of bone and muscle relaxation, the guide reluctantly handled the free check-in procedures for this little devil with a sullen face. Arbor held the house card and walked briskly to Lil Six Zheng. Lil Six, let's go. What about us? Pay for it yourself. Arbor called Lil Six and left without looking back. Chapter 10:28. Among the leading figures of the kingdoms in the world, this old great king of the Eastern Kingdom was absolutely an oddity. Even if you randomly picked out an unreliable great king from other kingdoms, they wouldn't be like him. The Eastern king had more than a dozen sons and allowed them to fight for the crown prince position every day. Today, one was poisoned to death, and tomorrow, another was assassinated. He didn't mind making a fuss. Yet, the old great king of the Eastern Kingdom was unperturbed from beginning to end, smiling as he watched the surging winds and clouds while sitting in the audience. This battle for the crown prince position lasted as long as 7 to 8 years. During this time, the old king of the Eastern Kingdom was pincered by Northern Imo, Northern Wei, and Southern Bailey and was forced to settle down on an island. This wasn't the end of it. His sons simply didn't think of going out to expand their territory or recover their lost territory. They continued to set their sights on that shrinking cake in the country and fought until their heads were broken and blood flowed as they fought for the crown prince position. At the end of the battle, this oddball old king once again made a shocking move. All the sons who had survived the internal strife were arranged according to their ages, and all of them were conferred the title of crown prince. Actually, this succession of crown princes was the same whether they were conferred or not. But the crown princes of the Eastern Kingdom were agitated. Every one of them felt that they were only half a step away from that throne. Even if they were currently residing on an island the size of a sesame seed, that was freaking the future great king, okay. The second crown prince of the Eastern Kingdom died last year, so there were only 7 crown princes left. Although the eldest crown prince, Ing Jian, wasn't very bright, he had a strong wife to deal with things for him. In addition, his strength as a level 9 mystic cultivator wasn't considered weak. Thus, he could be considered one of the oldest among the crown princes. The third crown prince, Ing Fa, was a taciturn and reticent person with a level 7 cultivation. His mother's status wasn't high, so he didn't have the support of his maternal family. He had always relied on the eldest crown prince to give him advice, so he was considered the eldest crown prince's little tail. These two people fell from a high altitude just now. Fortunately, the royal guards risked their lives to protect them. After losing 2 royal guards, the 2 unlucky fellows were covered in heavy wounds and battered and exhausted as they rushed to the adventurer base ahead. It just so happened that Arbor and Sixth Zheng had already gone in, while the others were still discussing with the adventurer base's junior manager whether or not they could reduce the amount of food. Therefore, when the two sides met, it was as if they were fighting cocks, swords drawn and ready for battle. Seeing that another fight was about to break out at the entrance of the base, the junior manager of the base shouted angrily and hurriedly ordered the guards to separate the two parties. Who dares to start a fight at the entrance of the adventurer base? No matter who it was. If you violate the rules of the base, you will be sent away immediately. What kind of joke was this? Did they think that this was a large-scale fortification in the city? There were tens of thousands of soldiers guarding the city, and there were even city towers that were over 100 zhang tall. There were ample defensive items, enough to block all attacks. Their poor little adventurer's stronghold didn't have anything. The tower in front of the door, the surrounding defensive walls, and the defensive trenches had been built over the past few years by relying entirely on manpower. In order to improve the defense of the small base, the commander had spent a lot of effort. Once there was a huge commotion, it would first attract the wandering zombies nearby, and second, there was a high possibility of triggering a terrifying beast tide. That wasn't a joke. 10 years ago, this small base had already been attacked by a beast tide. Chapter 1029. 10 years ago was also the last time the Mystic Beast Forest Secret Realm opened. At that time, two teams courting disaster started fighting at the entrance of the base. The loud noise caused the entire Mystic Beast Forest's periphery to become restless. In the end, the small adventurer base was nearly trampled to the ground by the beast tide, and countless innocent adventurers were killed or injured. Many young people from various countries who came to participate in the competition also lost their lives in this beast tide. Rebuilding the base would consume a large amount of time and money. No matter who it was, they wouldn't be able to bear such a loss. Everyone must have come for the Mystic Beast Forest Secret Realm, right? Since that's the case, it's better to resolve any conflicts you have in the Secret Realm. At that time, we won't be able to do anything about it. The base's junior manager nodded in understanding. Since you've come to our small base, then do everything according to our rules. If you insist on having a conflict in our base, then I'm sorry. According to the rules our commander has issued, I must ask you to leave. Humph. The eldest crown prince, Ing Jian, snorted angrily. He took out a large bag of grain from his inner world and tossed it to the junior manager. Arrange a spacious residence for us. Whoever had the grain was his father. The junior manager's eyes immediately lit up, and he bowed and nodded repeatedly in acknowledgement. He specially ordered one of his subordinates to lead Ing Jian's group to a place to stay. Afterward, he shifted his gaze back to Fan Xiuming and the others, causing them to blush slightly. The junior manager's wolf-like gaze clearly seemed to be looking at a few paupers who couldn't afford to pay. To put it bluntly, it wasn't that they couldn't afford to pay this bit of grain, they just felt like they were losing out. They were just resting in this small base for a day or two, but they had to hand over enough grain to feed their entire family for a month. This was simply unacceptable. Qin Susu's mouth twitched. She took out her share from her inner world and tossed it to the junior manager. All right, pay it all. Have the manager arrange a place for us to stay together. They had rushed here covered in dust. In any case, they had to get a good night's sleep first and adjust their states before entering the forest in high spirits. After the base manager received the fee, he immediately put on an amiable expression and ordered people to take them to find Arbor and Sixth Zheng. Duan Siren's footsteps paused as she stared at the steward's slightly swollen eyes and asked, "Just now, one of us took you there. Did she pay the fee?" The steward's expression changed slightly. He nodded hurriedly and said impatiently, "Why are you asking so much? Of course, you can only enter after paying the fee. All right, hurry up and go in." However, only he knew that at this moment, his heart was silently dripping tears of blood and flowing like a river. Not only did the girl give him a good thrashing, but she also forced a poison pill on him. If it wasn't for the poison that had completely controlled him, he would have already called the base's guards over and captured that savage girl. Duan Siren frowned and walked into the base with the others. After a while, she said, "I think the crown princess must not have paid." "I think so too." Everyone nodded in agreement. "Look at that fatty's bare appearance. He bullies the weak and fears the strong. His eyes are still swollen. He must have been beaten up by the crown princess." Dou Fengqi couldn't help but get angry. "We're all on the same team. Since she took care of the base's damn fatty and successfully waived her and little Sixth Zheng's fee, why didn't she just waive the fee for us as well?" Chapter 1030. Qin Susu snickered. Turning back to sweep a glance at Dou Fengqi, she curled her thin lips mockingly and said with a smile, "Miss Dou really is quite amusing. Don't say something about being in the same team being so high and mighty. Of the people who can enter the mystic realm now, who doesn't have the goal of going there to reap benefits? Could it be that when you enter the mystic realm, you'll still humbly give anything good to the crown princess when you see it?" After saying this, she walked forward without even looking back, coldly saying, "I advise you all to behave yourselves and not look for trouble when there's nothing to do. Our team is only formed temporarily, and we can go our separate ways anytime and anywhere for our own benefits." Teammates, ha! What was the point of saying it so nicely? How could she not be aware of the goal this team was formed for? A bunch of fools and idiots. It wasn't like they hadn't experienced the crown princess's methods before. Didn't they all see it on the day of the competition? Yet they still dared to boast shamelessly and rush over to provoke her like this. They really were some people who didn't care for their lives. Dou Fengqi was so angry that she laughed instead. Glaring at Qin Susu's departing figure, she stomped her feet. "This woman from the Qin estate has quite the temper. Do you know where she's from? I've never seen her before, but she suddenly popped up and claimed to be the foster sister of two young masters from the Qin estate. Isn't this hilarious?" Duan Siren didn't say much, but her eyes contained traces of faint melancholy on her round apple-like face. "All right. Stop talking." Hong Bai irritably interrupted Dou Fengqi's words. "Are you all still going to rest? Everyone angrily rushed to the accommodations arranged by the manager. That manager was also a shrewd person. Knowing that their team was split into two groups when they moved into the base, he was especially happy to watch them dogfight. Thus, he simply arranged for the 7 of them to stay in an independent courtyard and let them bicker with each other as they pleased. When Do Fengqi and the others arrived, Arbor and little Sixth Zheng just happened to be leaving. The two swept them an indifferent glance, nodded slightly, and then walked out the door. "Hey, how are the rooms allocated?" Do Fengqi couldn't help but angrily ask. From the looks of it, little Sixth Zheng and Arbor, who had arrived first, had freaking picked their own rooms first and even locked their rooms when they left. "We've all paid for it. A dough of grain. Why did they have to live in such a shabby house? There were only 4 rooms. How am I supposed to live here?" "All right, enough with the nonsense," Qin Susu said in annoyance. "You, me, and Duan Qi will share a room. The Fan clan's kid and the Hong clan's kid would share a room and make do with each other for a night or 2. It's already good enough that we have a house to stay in. Once we enter the forest, we'll be exposed to the wind and the sun every day. I don't even know if we can have a good night's sleep. Why should the 3 of us share a room? She only has 1 room each." Do Fengqi shouted. "Qin Susu, right? Is there something wrong with your brain? Or do you like Miss Chow? I see that you've been putting in good words for her the whole way." Qin Susu was currently dressed in black men's clothing. Her long hair was tied up high, revealing her delicate and round forehead. It looked very energetic, and it was hard to tell if it was a man or a woman. Hearing this, the corners of her mouth couldn't help but twitch. She just didn't want to provoke the troublesome crown princess and cause less trouble, but she didn't expect her words to be misinterpreted as a matter of sexual orientation. "When we enter the Mystic Beast Forest, we interact as teammates. There's no distinction between the crown princess and the commoners." Do Fengqi prattled. "Qin Susu, you and I will share a room." Arbor directly threw the key to Qin Susu and turned to leave with Sixth Zheng. Chapter 1031. This tiny adventurer base might be small, but it had everything. There was a small bazaar outside. Compared to the cold and cheerless city, the bazaar here was much more lively. There were all sorts of things for sale, but most of them were all kinds of medicines and medicinal herbs obtained nearby. And in the periphery of the Mystic Beast Forest, low-grade medicinal herbs that could be seen everywhere were basically things that no one cared about or wanted to buy. However, Arbor's trip today was for low-grade and mid-grade medicinal herbs. She came to the bazaar to issue the mission of collecting low-grade and mid-grade medicinal herbs. She knew that this adventurer base definitely had a place specifically for issuing missions. Previously, in Teacher Long Chuyun's medicinal garden of 20 mu, the majority of the medicinal herbs left for her were black-grade and above precious. And the medicinal herbs that the white snakelet had stolen from who knew where were also mostly rare medicinal herbs. Thus, it could be said that she now had a fairly complete collection of black-grade, earth-grade, and heaven-grade spirit flowers and herbs. She even had as many as a dozen kinds of divine-grade medicinal herbs, but she was only missing some ordinary low-grade and mid-grade medicinal herbs. Before this, she had mostly planted mid-grade and high-grade medicinal herbs in her own medicinal field, and there weren't many low-grade medicinal herbs at all. To tell the truth, she was too lazy to pick those low-grade and mid-grade medicinal herbs that were relatively easy to raise. She would usually just casually buy a few stalks when she strolled around a pharmacy. Now that she was in the Mystic Beast Forest, she planned to replenish all the low-grade and mid-grade medicinal herbs that she previously lacked. That way, when she refined pills in the future, she wouldn't be dumbfounded by the lack of basic medicinal herbs. This place was close to the forest, so there were all kinds of low-grade medicinal herbs. This mission definitely wouldn't be difficult, and there were plenty of people vying to take it on. Burly mercenaries carrying axes, hammers, and large sabers, walking seductively, and prostitutes throwing flirtatious glances everywhere could be seen practically everywhere in the bazaar. It was extremely rare to see a handsome young master like Sixth Zheng and an icy and peerlessly beautiful little stoic like Arbor in the bazaar. Thus, when the two appeared, they attracted a lot of attention. The two casually found a stall owner to inquire about the location of the mission issuance center. That stall owner immediately enthusiastically pointed ahead for them. There is. Walk 50 meters forward. Look, that stall with the red sail is right there. Arbor's mouth twitched as he glanced at the shabby stall. Sure enough, there were more people crowding around that stall than anywhere else. It was really a mission distribution center. The stall owner seemed to have noticed her disdain and hurriedly laughed. We'll keep everything simple, little girl. If you want to issue a mission, you can just go there. After thanking him, Xiao Mu and little Sixth Zheng arrived at the mission issuance center one after another. Just as he approached the shabby stall, he heard a familiar roar. Do you know the rules? This is the mission that we revealed first, okay? What right do you have to interfere? Ha! You're just a small team of outsiders. TSK, you only have 8 or 9 useless people. You want to take on a level 3 mission? Are you tired of living? I'm doing this for the sake of your lives. That's why I'm helping you. What are you roaring for? Haven't you heard of our Proud Hawk squad? Then hurry up and ask around in this base. Who doesn't know that our Proud Hawk squad has already been gloriously promoted to a level 3 special operations team? Arbor's eyes lit up, and she rushed up to the tall fatty whose face was flushed red and called out crisply, "Hello, Captain." Chapter 1032. Everyone turned to look at her, dumbfounded. However, Xiao Mu's gaze only landed on the faces of huge bear squads Gao Sheng and company. She simply didn't notice that the person who was arguing with Gao Sheng was looking at her with glowing eyes, his saliva about to overflow uncontrollably. Hey, aren't you that one? The little girl who saved us at the north gate of Guanlan City. Vice Captain Hua Gu had a good memory and recognized Arbor at a glance. The main reason was that their encounter that day had been a little frightening and left a deep impression on them. When a group of zombies was crushing their huge bear squad from behind, the little girl suddenly appeared and threw out 2 firearms as if she had the help of the gods, killing the zombies on the spot. Arbor nodded and looked at Hua Gu. Vice Captain. A young member of the huge bear squad was so excited that his face turned red. Captain, I told you the little girl knew us. Who would have thought that the huge bear squad's reputation had spread so far and wide? Any random young and beautiful girl who came out of nowhere could call out their captains and vice captains' identities. Just how much did she worship their huge bear squad? The young member thought to himself complacently. Captain Gao Xing unexpectedly slapped the back of his head, and Gao Xing grumpily pulled him to the side. He nodded at Xiao Mu and said with a smile, "What a coincidence, little miss. You left after saving us in Guanlan City that day. We didn't even have time to thank you." "No need to thank me." Arbor shook his head. "It was nothing. Captain, is the huge bear squad also here for a mission?" Yes. Gao Xing suddenly thought of something and turned around to roar at the Proud Hawk squad. You! Hurry up and give us back our mission. The captain of the Proud Hawk squad was staring at Arbor in a semi-infatuated state. He couldn't hear Gao Xing's reprimand. His old, weather-beaten face revealed a lustful expression as he stared at Arbor with shining eyes. After a while, he gulped and said, "Little girl, are you from Gao Xing's squad?" "Oh my, what's the point of staying in such a lousy squad with less than 10 people? Why don't you join our Proud Hawk squad? Our Proud Hawk squad has just been promoted to a 3rd-grade squad. You trashy level 3 squad leader, what are you talking about in front of me? If you interrupt again, I'll cut off your tongue." Arbor roared at the man. "Can't you see I'm talking to the captain? How rude." The smile on the Proud Hawk squad's captain's face froze. Uncle Gao Sheng, on the other hand, was flattered. It was simply baffling. Where did this little girl's strange affinity come from? Could it be that this was the so-called fate that people talked about? You! The captain of the Proud Hawk squad glared at Xiao Mu before swallowing his anger and suppressing his bellyful of anger. He put on a smiling face and said, Okay, you tell him. We'll talk about our business after you're done. Who's us with you? Sixth Zheng snapped at the captain of the Proud Hawk squad. What an ignorant man. Scram to wherever it was cool. Captain. I have a mission to issue. Will our huge bear squad accept it? Arbor's eyes twinkled as he looked at the tall, fat uncle, and asked expectantly. How could the tall, fat uncle have the heart to refuse? He inexplicably nodded and agreed. Sure. I don't know what the mission is, but as long as our huge bear squad can do it, we definitely won't refuse. It's definitely a mission that you can do. Don't worry. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.